Boulder City Council. I am Taisha Adams, Council Member Adams, and thank you for joining us. We have on tonight's agenda one item, which is the 2025 recommended budget. Before we get into our work, of course, I would like to outline how the meeting will be conducted. We will review staff's presentations and then we will have time for questions. Um, we Instead of having one long hour of presentations, we have created two sections. Section one will be looking primarily at the financial outlook, the recommended budget, operations and capital budget overview, the community budget engagement, um, the 2025 budget highlights by goal area, and the ARPA funding and citywide grants strategy. After that chunk, we will hold space for clarifying questions from the council, so we don't get too far in before folks get to the next section. And then section two will be primarily looking at the capital improvement program, funding outlook, future planning, and the long-term financial strategy, as well as the next steps and council process. Once the presentation ends, council will be invited again to provide clarifying questions. The Financial Strategy Committee, which comprises of Mayor Pro Tem Spear, Councilmember Wallach, Councilmember Schuhart, would like to note at the end of the presentation the recommended council process for any changes that council members may have to the 2025 budget, which you would request, and of course request that council members present any kind of adjustments or changes at the micro level at that time, and not at this time, where we will be primarily focusing at the macro level. Let's see. Okay. At the end of the presentation, okay, I already said that part. We will now turn to our city manager, Nuria Rivera Vandemin. I'm sorry, I did not practice that last piece. I apologize. I'm going to work on that to introduce our item. Nuria.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Adams. I think I'm going to start just going by Nuria because, I'm in good company with Pink and Madonna and all those Lizzo, all those one-worded wonderful women. So I'm just going to be Nuria. So thank you again, Councilmember Adams, and hello, Council. Tonight we get to talk about our budget, and I always say it's one of my favorite nights with you. And you've heard me refer to it in the past as a constrained budget, and I want to share a bit about why we say that. It's not that we're reducing services or laying off staff. We are nowhere at that point. What we really mean is that our ability to be additive, to add or create new ongoing programs and services is simply limited. And while we hope we will see more prosperous times ahead, currently our amazing city is experiencing a pretty flattened source of revenue. And like any good steward of fiscal resources, that tells me it's time to tighten our belts, especially as I take a look at our collective house and see that we are way overdue for a little TLC. Our rec centers need some love and attention. Many of our city buildings are on their last legs, and we're trying to be as frugal as we can as we required maintenance as we wait for Alpine Balsam to come online. To add to our issues, our dollars simply aren't stretching as far as they used to. So all our major construction projects, from transportation to utilities and everywhere else in between, are just costing us more money to do the same work that would have cost us less 5 or 10 years ago. The other reality I'll say is that as we look back over the years, we've continued to adjust our budget to some operational realities. Personnel costs have risen across the nation post-pandemic, and that's just a reality we're all facing. And it is critical that we keep up as best we can with the market to not just recruit the best talent, but to retain the extraordinary talented staff we already have. While the past few years have afforded us a bit of latitude with vacancy savings as we struggled with filling our vacant positions, we have actually stabilized our workforce and are needing to be a little more conservative in ensuring that we're modeling and accounting for the necessary cost increases required in our 2025 budget to account for new hires, promotions, labor negotiated, and market adjustments. Our general fund has also been strained over the last years as so much of our budget is also constrained, it's that magic word again, by funds that are dedicated to a very specific uses. Last year, we began looking at the purposes of those dedicated funds to ensure that we are leveraging their use as much as possible, and we will continue to do so in the future so that we can best free up those general fund dollars. I remain thankful to you, Council, for taking up the challenge of diving deep into the long-term financial strategy, and it is this work that would help us truly ensure the city is on a more sustainable financial path. Our commitment to you and to community is to be as candid as we can about where we stand financially and to make sure we bring you the entire picture of our financial obligations when we take on future projects, from planning to ongoing maintenance, so that we're clear on the financial impact of our collective decisions. It is from this place of shared understanding that we believe all of us can come to a better understanding of how to better prioritize the way in which we spend our limited resources for the betterment of community. Now, while the charter requires me to submit a budget to you for approval, I know that I do not do this alone. The extraordinary finance team led by Cara Skinner and our budget officer, Charlotte Husky, and her team have done an extraordinary job this year, and you'll soon hear from them. But I'd be remiss if I didn't also lift up the hard work of all of our departments who work tirelessly, virtually year-round, I'll say, to analyze their needs and put forward their budget request to the executive budget team for review. We know we cannot fulfill every request in a given year, as the needs across the organization are many. So I am thankful too for the dedication and thoughtfulness of the members of our executive budget team who put in every year in helping to evaluate all the requests that come forward as we build our annual budget. So with that, I will pass it over to Cara.
Thank you, Nuria. Good evening, Council. Cara Skinner, Chief Financial Officer. As Nuria noted, tonight is a big night. It's when we share with the Council and community the City Manager's recommended budget. And first of all, I too want to thank the entire organization. They really put in thoughtful, strategic, hard work into producing the budget online, the budget highlights, and this presentation tonight. We believe the budget before you is reflective of Council and community priorities. We also believe it's responsive to input we heard from the community through various partnerships and engagement efforts. The budget before you funds a tremendously diverse set of city programs and services that we know are meeting the needs of our community each and every day. From ensuring we all have fresh, clean water to our homes and businesses, an efficient and safe wastewater system, providing a quick and trained response when there is an emergency, having a safe and efficient multimodal transportation system, arts, culture, recreational programming, unparalleled open space, and programs to support many with basic needs, including affordable housing. And that list is not exhaustive. It's a budget that is balanced across 41 funds that does not require any cuts or reductions. We do note that any new additions to the budget would require a trade-off or a reduction someplace else. While we have presented a balanced, fiscally responsible budget, we know the budget before you does not meet all the needs and desires of the community or priority actions identified in the citywide strategic plan. And we hear from the community regularly about desires for additional services or programs or heightened service levels. How are we going to approach these unfunded priority actions, needs, or desires? First, we recognize we need to have the data and practices in place to evaluate and ensure that the dollars we currently have are being used well. We are pleased at the progress we've made toward those outcomes-based budgeting to inform whether our investments are good investments and achieving intended outcomes. We know many are anxious for our data practices to be more mature than they are, but we are excited to build upon this 3-year journey the organization has been on. We're confident we're on the right path. We'll continue to develop and mature the practices, and each year we will have more data and analytics to inform decisions. Second, as Nuria spoke to, we are really excited that Council has lifted the work of the long-term financial strategy so that as an organization, we are committed to an effort that includes a broader and deeper dive with a longer-term, holistic approach regarding the future of city funding and city programs and services. You'll hear more about that planned effort at the end of the presentation. So with that, I am pleased to hand it over to Charlotte Husky, our budget officer, and members of her budget team.
Thanks, Cara. Good evening, council members. I'm Charlotte Husky, budget officer for the city of Boulder. I am joined tonight by our budget team, Scott Carpenter, principal budget analyst, Tony Townsend, who is our senior grants program manager, and Stacy Polyakova, who will help me in tonight's presentation and presenting the 2025 recommended budget to you all. I will share my screen and make sure that all of that is working correctly before we get started. Okay. So we're excited to bring forward the 2025 recommended budget to you all this evening. As Nuria and Cara mentioned, this is really the culmination of work over the past year in developing the 2025 budget, and department staff from across the organization are here tonight as well for answering questions that you all might have about the 2025 budget and operations and programs that are included in the 2025 budget. So I wanted to walk through our agenda for this evening before diving into our financial trends and outlook. We'll walk through the financial outlook and major revenue sources, talk about our overview for both the capital budget as well as the operating budget for the 2025 recommended budget, speak to our efforts with community budget engagement that we are excited to continue to build upon, starting first with the 2024 budget and building upon that with this 2025 budget, speak to our 2025 strategic key investments that we have made across the 2025 budget by goal area within the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework that really centers our budgeting practice now as an organization. And then we'll end the first section speaking about our efforts with ARPA funding and the programmatic efforts that we are still continuing to work toward utilizing ARPA funding, as well as our citywide grant strategy. Our second section that we'll pick back up after council questions is walking through some of our key capital projects within the 6-year capital improvement program, 2025 through 2030, and then speak to our funding outlook, future planning, and long-term financial strategy, and then finally discuss council process, next steps, and council questions and feedback to end the evening. And so starting with looking at our financial outlook and major revenue sources for the 2025 projected revenues that we are seeing and are bringing forward this evening is a total of $492.5 million across the 2025 projected budget. You can see on this right-hand side the breakdown of all of our revenue sources across the organization. This supports our entire organization as a city. You'll note that sales and use tax is our largest and major revenue source at 37% of our projected revenues for 2025. We mentioned in our May financial forecast that we have seen a flattening of sales and use tax, particularly with year-end of 2023, and have recently looked at our forecast through the end of 24, and that forecast remains the same. That flattening of sales and use tax is anticipated to continue through 2024, and I'll share on the next couple of slides what that looks like in graph form. Our property taxes are 12% of the 2025 projected revenues, and we are anticipating continued uncertainty, particularly around the administration and some of the projections with the recent legislation that's been brought forward over the past couple of weeks. One of the things that I want to note within our projected revenues for 2025 is you'll see an increase in our intergovernmental revenues, and this is primarily due to an increase in anticipated grants, transportation-related grants associated with grants such as the Colorado Department of Transportation and Safe Streets for All, for example. We also see an increase in our cash and lieu revenues year over year, and this is primarily due to planned revenues that we anticipated to receive associated with the Millennium Hotel. And so we'll see that increase in the development and impact fees section within this within this pie chart. And then finally, the last piece that I'll point out on our revenues for 2025 is that we have an adjustment of our long-term rental tax for the EPRIS program, and this tax is an increase of 62,000, and we'll speak more to the additional funding that will help support those revenues, will help support additional programmatic services related to rental assistance programming, and we'll speak to that on our key investments later in the presentation. So when we look at our sales and use tax revenues and projections, what we see here is a representation from 2016 to 2030. And from 2016 to 2023, you'll see our sales and use tax actuals and our projections from 2024 through 2030. And so what you can see in particular of note here is this dip in 2020 due to the pandemic period. We began working with CU Boulder for forecasting around that same time period. And some of the adjustments that we made to our forecast modeling in 2022 was adjusting to be less conservative. One of the things to note is that you'll see this large increase between 2020 and 2023, an average of 9.2% increase between these years. And in particular, the years that I want to point out here is this flattening from 2023 to 2024. And so you'll see that same citywide total number for sales and use tax year over year that's projected. And then in the out years, we're forecasting a 2 to 2.5% growth. When we look at our citywide property tax projections, this is another major revenue source for the city of Boulder. One of the things that we had shared in May is that there's a lot of uncertainty around property tax. And so this graph really represents the recent legislation that was passed by the state legislature a couple of weeks ago. We went in and performed our projections associated with the impact of HB 24B 1001. And you can see here that there is this prompt of 5% statewide revenue growth to change the local revenue assessment rates. And so the top line in the blue is what our budgeted amount is citywide. When we look at the impact of this legislation, there are two options that we're projecting, and that's really based on this statewide growth limit. The first that you'll see in the red, and then the second is in the yellow, representing greater than 5% statewide growth. And so when we look at this impact across the city and what it means for our major revenue source for the city, we're anticipating between a $1 to $3 million impact on our property tax revenues. I want to also just emphasize this is because, given the recency of the legislation, we were not able to include this in our budget, but the revenue impacts do not begin until 2026, but is something that we will certainly need to be monitoring and consider further during the 2026 budget development process. So looking at our 2025 recommended budget overview, we are really excited, as Nuria and Cara mentioned, to be on and to be in this third year and final year of our efforts of a 3-year implementation plan for budgeting for resilience and equity. We'll speak to more of the efforts that we've performed over the past couple of years, as well as some of the implementation efforts associated with outcomes, measures, and targets that we have developed as part of this year's budget. This next section will also focus on our operating overview, as well as a very high-level overview of our capital budget. So starting off with sharing again our summary of key budget assumptions for the 2025 recommended budget. We shared these 7 assumptions with City Council and community members earlier during our financial forecast earlier in May, but recognizing that we have funding constraints that significantly limit our flexibility for new ongoing initiatives, new ongoing programs that are not yet committed associated with our funding. That potential legislation generates uncertainty of property tax revenues just pointed to that on some of the prior slides. Our capital improvement program will continue to focus on investing in sustainable ongoing capital maintenance for funding of city needs and infrastructure, something that we have recognized has been underfunded in prior years. We'll continue to explore the flexibility across all of our city funds, including dedicated funds, existing budget allocations to support key community investments and needs. The 2025 dedication of the sales and use tax, creation of the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Funds assumes the inclusion of the current art operating programs. Recent living wage increases as well as the minimum wage ordinance are of consideration when we're thinking about the fiscal impacts to the 2025 budget. And then finally, when looking at our ongoing funding needs as an organization, and we'll speak more to this in the second section of our presentation, our ongoing funding needs are significant and beyond funding availability. And so what this really points to and leads to is the development of a long-term financial strategy across all of our funds and city functions. So looking at the snapshot of our total recommended budget overview, this pie chart on the right is one way of looking at the 2025 recommended budget. This is broken down by department. This includes both our operating budget and our capital budget. Later in the presentation, in a few slides, we'll share what this looks like by the sustainability, equity, and resilience goal area. Specifically, when we look at the operating budget across all of our funds, we have a total of $399.3 million. One of the pieces that we shared earlier with council and looking at our budget direction for 2025 and recognizing the limited ongoing funding that we had, we looked as an organization during this year's budget, in particular, at realignments of dollars across the organization. And so we utilized the budgeting process to help us identify areas of existing funding and pointing those and shifting those dollars toward prioritized program outcomes. And so I'll share a few of those realignment examples where we shifted existing funding from a certain programmatic area to another programmatic area based on our key investments and some of the priorities that came forward during the budgeting process. The other thing that you'll note within the 2025 recommended budget is that, again, we have limited ongoing funding available, and so we performed limited ongoing operating increases. We also utilized strategically one-time funding to perform one-time funding investments within the operating budget, and we'll speak to specific key investments when we share out by the sustainability, equity, and resilience goal area in a few slides. The capital budget for 2025 is a total of $190.2 million across 19 funds that we have in our budget. And this works to advance over 150 projects in the 2025 budget alone. I'll speak more to the 6-year CIP in a little bit, the 6-year capital improvement program. But first diving into a little bit further detail of the operating budget. So when we look at the key drivers of the operating budget, what is really the year-over-year increases that we're seeing? One of the things that you'll note on this table is the expense category broken down by operating, our planned debt service, and our internal service charges. The thing that you'll note in looking at the percent change on the right-hand side is that when we exclude debt service and internal service charges, we're looking at a year-over-year increase of our operating budget of 1.3%. So the majority of our operating increase is truly due to additional investments in planned debt service as well as our internal service charges. And that includes internal service charges associated with fleet and equipment replacements, technology increases, as well as facility maintenance, and debt service and lease payments for utilities, South Boulder Creek project, as well as the Alpine Balsa and Western City campus. So looking further at our 2025 operating budget, when we look at our realignments focus, these are a few examples of realignments across the board of what we see when we're shifting dollars from one program area to another program area. You look and see within the family services program, for example, that's aligned to the healthy and socially thriving goal area, we realigned 27,000 from the Housing and Human Services Administration operation to help support a full-time position for the Family Resource Schools program. And this really helps to fulfill the need for a full after-school program for the fourth highest need school in BVSD Crestview Elementary. We realigned $91,000 to help fund and support the Urban Rangers program within the SAFE SARE category. And this decision was really to, to align non-standard staffing to park areas where it has the greatest impact with operations, and that's prioritizing the Pearl Street Mall and Civic area. And then finally, one of the examples of realignments that we performed within the budget is realigning 755,000 from the transportation department's gas and electricity budget to fund the city's acquisition and management of over 4,500 city streetlights. So we're excited to share our efforts on budgeting for resilience and equity, and excited to invite Scott Carpenter, Principal Budget Analyst, to speak over the next couple of slides, who was integral, particularly in year 3 of helping advance this effort. So I'll toss it to you, Scott.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Good evening, Council. Scott Carpenter, Principal Budget Analyst. So we are in our 3rd and final year of budgeting for resilience and equity, helping the city move from increment-based budgeting to outcome-based budgeting. In year 1, a comprehensive inventory was established with alignment to our SARE framework. In year 2, we began to identify outcomes and measures. And in year 3, in partnership with the IT department's enterprise data team, we conducted 18 individual workshops tailored to each city department. We refined and standardized department program outcomes and their associated measures, and we created the first citywide comprehensive inventory of outcomes, measures, and targets. These outcomes and measures have been made publicly available through an online dashboard that I will share on the next slide. And our program outcomes have been aligned to the greater SARE framework and the citywide strategic plan where applicable. So this is a snapshot of the publicly available dashboard that houses our inventory of outcomes and measures. As you can see at the top, it enables you to select one department at a time in the department selection dropdown. And then in the program selection dropdown, you can select one or more programs, and that will populate the table below. The table contains the outcomes and associated measures, the programs to which they are aligned to, the SARE goal to which they are aligned to, targets for 2024 and 2025, and year-to-date actuals for 2024. This is our first year of targets and actuals. Some departments submitted, others described collection plans of how to gather actuals for the 2026 budget. We requested targets and actuals for 2023, 2024, and 2025. 25 targets and actuals were submitted for 2023. 227 targets and actuals are anticipated for 2024 and 2025. In total, 385 outcomes and measures were developed across 109 program areas for 18 different departments. And we will be updating, iterating, and refining this on a yearly basis during our budget process. And with that, I will turn it back to Charlotte.
Thanks, Scott. So Scott just highlighted our efforts as an organization. I want to really just echo and uplift all of the work that's been done over the past 3 years. This has really been a significant effort for us as an organization to get to this point, and so we are excited to share out with council and community members the culmination of work that has occurred across those 3 years. And we also recognize that we are still on the journey to iterate, to evaluate, and to continue developing our outcomes and outcome-based budgeting as part of budgeting for resilience and equity. So we're looking forward to doing that on an annual basis. One of the things that is exciting, is an exciting result of our efforts with budgeting for resilience and equity is that we have now the ability to look at our investments by the sustainability, equity, and resilience goal area. And so there are 7 goal areas within the SARE framework. I will walk through to just orient us around some of the programmatic and operations and services that are provided within each of these areas and speak more to that on the next several slides. But this percentage breakdown represents the operating budget by goal area. So starting first with responsibly governed, this goal area really focuses more on internal facing, important internal facing services that support the city and the city operations. And some examples of that include the fleet program, which helps to perform maintenance and repair of over 1,000 city vehicles. The IT infrastructure services program, which helps to provide reliable data systems and fiber optic communications infrastructure that support over 1,500 city employees. And our risk management program, which works to minimize risk exposure for city employees, residents, and visitors. When we look at the SAFE goal area, the SAFE goal area focuses on supporting and fostering positive community relations and ensuring residents are supported and cared for during emergencies and natural disasters. In 2025, this really, when we look year over year increases, we'll see a 4.3% increase. And this is primarily due to the investments in the Urban Rangers program, as well as within the Independent Police Monitor. And we'll speak more to those when we share out some of our key strategic investments within our budget highlights section. Some examples of the programs that fall within this category include public safety operations, and within this, for example, are the emergency operations within the fire rescue department, and then the alternative response program within the police department that focuses on holistic and non-traditional law enforcement approach to community safety. When we look at the livable category, 13% of the operating budget, some examples of programs that fall within this category include homelessness services, behavioral health response, and community investments. Some examples of specifically of community investments are both human services investments and housing investments. And these investments provide millions of dollars annually to support nonprofit human services and housing partner agencies to benefit Boulder's diverse low-income populations. When we look year to year, the livable category actually increased 24%, and this is primarily driven by additional investments in affordable housing from 2024 to 2025. The environmentally sustainable goal area includes programs such as community wildfire resilience, utilities water treatment program, and open spaces resource stewardship program. The community wildfire resilience program is one slice of our wildfire resilience efforts across the entire organization. And more specifically, this is specifically funded by the climate tax that was recently passed by voters a couple of years ago. The water treatment program and the resource stewardship program focus on climate resilience, and truly all of these programs focus on climate resilience, the protection of public health through the stewardship of our ecological and water assets. When we look at the healthy and socially thriving goal area, this goal area focuses on uplifting residents to meet critical needs, enjoy high levels of social, physical, and mental well-being, and have access to abundant recreational, cultural, and educational opportunities. These are 2 programs that are examples that fall within this goal area, including recreation operations that focuses on the daily management of recreation centers, outdoor pools, sports and health and wellness, and arts and culture, which focuses on the cultural vibrancy of the city through arts, culture, and heritage programming. When we look at year-over-year increases, this goal area increased 4.4%, and this is primarily driven by an 86% increase in arts funding with the recent passage of the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Tax. Accessible and connected comprises 9% of the city's 2025 operating budget. There are some examples listed here, including our transportation planning and operations programs, as well as our communications programs. These two programs support the goal area within with the management of safe and accessible multimodal transportation, as well as fostering connectivity and engagement across the community. When we look at year-over-year changes, we're at about a 7% change, and this is driven primarily by increases to our investments in technology communications, as well as the transportation planning program to support the HOP bus service. And then finally, looking at our economically vital goal area, two programs that are examples that fall within this category are economic vitality and district management. And these two areas focus on developing and implementing strategies to support a healthy and safe and resilient economy and quality of life. And when we look year over year, this increase is 24%. And that's primarily driven by the Small Business Development Center coming in-house within the city. And so shifting gears to share just a very high-level snapshot of our 6-year CIP from 2025 to 2030, our capital improvement program. Our capital improvement program supports over 200 capital projects across the 6-year horizon. With the 2025 budget, I mentioned earlier that our total capital budget is $190.2 million. Across the 6-year period, it's $807.4 million, supporting over 200 capital projects. And there are various departments that have capital improvement programs that work during the budget development process and really on a year-round basis to work on these capital investments and advancing these capital projects. One of the things that I'll point out is within the 2025 budget in particular, you'll notice that the majority of the investments are attributed to 3 departments, including utilities, transportation and mobility, and facilities and fleet. One of the other things that I'll point out when you look across the 6-year horizon is that the capital budget or the planned spending fluctuates from year to year. And this is really due to the amount of funding that's available, the project scope, as well as the project timeline. So shifting gears now to our budget engagement efforts for 2025, we are excited to build upon our 2024 budget engagement efforts with community connectors and residents. And I will hand it off to Stacy Polyakova, who will walk through our expanded engagement efforts for this year.
Hi, everyone. Stacy Polyakova, budget analyst. This year, we focused on expanding and growing our engagement efforts and building upon what we did last year. I will be presenting on our engagement techniques and answering the question, how did we engage with the community and who did we hear from? Our community engagement is structured early in the budget process to enable feedback prior to budget submissions and decision-making. The efforts this year built upon our 2024 efforts. And this year, we performed 3 specific modes of engagement. The first is our continued partnership with community connectors. We conducted budget sessions to lay the groundwork and confirm understanding of budget processes, hosted feedback sessions on new programs that received new funding, such as the Arts and Culture Program and Wildfire Resilience Program, and confirmed ranking of priorities as aligned with the SARE framework. The second pillar of our engagement was establishing a connection with the boards and commissions processes and cycles. The goal was to enhance awareness and alignment of current boards and commissions processes to the budget cycle. And the third pillar was our 2025 budget questionnaire, which ran from mid-April to mid-May. The questionnaire invited Boulder community members to provide input on budget priorities as aligned to the SARE goal areas. And this was done through ranking the 7 goal areas and providing opportunity for additional comment and feedback. Speaking to the questionnaire specifically, we attempted to reach out to many populations of the community. and this includes both those who live and work within the city. Our efforts included both virtual and in-person engagement. We shared the questionnaire through multiple avenues, including a press release, social media, the Nextdoor app, and Inside Boulder News. We worked with the community connectors and residents to share the questionnaire with their respective communities and with the boards and commissions members. We reached out to the Economic Vitality Partners, which include Downtown Boulder Partnership, Latino Chamber, Small Business Development Center, and Boulder Chamber. And we reached out to approximately 7,650 businesses. The questionnaire ran from mid-April to mid-May, and this timing was intentional and is structured early in the budget process to enable feedback from the community prior to budget submissions by the departments. So now that we've shared both how we engaged and who we reached out to, I'll summarize the results of our community feedback. This slide speaks to the aspect of our engagement that focused on our partnership with the community connectors in residence. Our continued partnership with the community connectors provided feedback on priorities of communities that have been historically underrepresented in government decision-making. And as part of engagement this year, we asked connectors to prioritize the SARE framework objectives. This is something that was conducted last year as well. And the goal of this was to confirm the priorities and build upon work previously conducted. We saw that the prioritization of objectives put supporting advancing racial equity as the first priority, followed by housing availability and affordability, and then followed by supporting financial security and economic opportunity. This prioritization is similar to last year, except for a notable jump of the advancing racial equity objective, which moved up from third place to first place. The results of the other component of our engagement, the questionnaire, is summarized on this slide. Our questionnaire received over 1,014 responses. The questionnaire asked participants to rank the 7 SARE goal areas in terms of priority. And the results show that on average, participants ranked safe as number 1, healthy and socially thriving as number 2, and livable as number 3. As Charlotte mentioned earlier today, within the SARE framework, SAFE means a welcoming and inclusive community that fosters positive neighborhood and community relations and ensures that all residents are secure and cared for during emergencies and natural disasters. Public infrastructure is well maintained and reliable, and natural resources like water, air, and land are protective. Healthy and socially thriving represents that all Boulder residents are able to meet their critical needs, enjoy high levels of social, physical, and mental well-being, and have access to abundant recreational, cultural, and educational opportunities in an environment that respects and celebrates human rights. And livable represents high-performing, safe, and well-maintained buildings and infrastructure that accommodate a diverse set of community needs for working, learning, playing, and living. These descriptions of each goal area were provided within the questionnaire, but these areas can represent a lot of different things to different people. And so we also received additional qualitative feedback in regards to people's interpretation and association with these goals. And I'll speak to that feedback in a second. We looked at the questionnaire results through the participants' various demographic information that they provided to see how the results could change. This chart shows the average ranking of each SARE goal area disaggregated by race and ethnicity. On the left side column are the 7 SARE goal areas, and the first column over shows the average priority ranking of the questionnaire as a whole. The following columns show the average priority ranking by race and ethnicity. And as a whole, SAFE remained ranked number 1, and there was some additional variance with the ranking of the other SARE goals. We looked at the data. Oh, can I go back for a second? We looked at the data disaggregated by other demographic information as well, such as housing status and income, and there were some but minimal changes to the average prioritization. The change in prioritization that was most notable is that in the demographic of participants that rent their housing, livable was the number 1 goal area. The questionnaire asked participants to rank the goal areas, but also provided an opportunity to share additional comments and feedback. For those who prioritized safe as their number 1 priority, common themes that were written in consisted of crime reduction, transportation maintenance and traffic safety, downtown vitality, public space safety, unhoused population encampments, and some other themes. Healthy and socially thriving, common themes were unhoused populations and encampments, arts funding, downtown vitality, public transportation, affordability. And livable themes were housing, unhoused populations and encampments, affordability, affordable housing. These are themes that we have seen consistently. However, as the earlier slides show, engagement efforts with the community connectors and residents informs us that historically underrepresented communities have differing and additional priorities. As a reminder, community connector and residents prioritization consisted of advancing racial equity, providing affordable housing, and supporting financial opportunities. Our budget engagement efforts this year and the resulting input helped to inform some of the budget decisions that we'll be sharing. And so with that, I'll bring it back to Charlotte, Scott, and Tony.
Thank you, Stacy. All right, so the next section, we will share out our 2025 operating budget highlights by goal area, and want to emphasize before sharing the key operating investments that we made across the 2025 budget. Just as a reminder, again, our limited ongoing available funding, and so want to highlight the key one-time investments that you'll see on the next several slides. As well as some of the decision making around our limited funding, but just wanted to share that out. And so the other piece that I'll note is that this year was the first year of the citywide strategic plan, and we utilize this in our budget development process. And you'll see that reflected in some of the investments over the next few slides, where we look to invest and advance some of those priority actions and strategies that are outlined in the citywide strategic plan. And with that, I'll toss it back to Scott.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So 2025 budget highlights for the responsibly governed goal include $105,000 for cybersecurity and disaster management planning. This supports the updating and enhancing of our cybersecurity disaster plan. This will allow the city to respond to ever-changing risk and help shield against future disruptions to operations. There is additional funding for Office of Disaster Management training that will advance efforts in regional disaster prevention and planning. There are significant one-time capital maintenance backlog investments to the tune of $4.3 million. The city has significant unfunded and underfunded needs supporting capital maintenance. The 2025 budget includes $3.3 million for fire apparatus replacements and $1 million for facilities capital maintenance. Costs associated with these have risen significantly in recent years. These investments are aligned to citywide strategic plan strategies, strategy 12, implementing organizational and financial best practices to continuously improve asset management, and strategy 2, advancing efforts to enhance regional disaster prevention, preparedness, and response. 2025 budget highlights for the SAFE goal include $63,000 for the Office of the Independent Police Monitor. This is increased funding to strengthen civilian review of law enforcement and help learning from best practices to promote accountability through annual attendance at the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. There are Axon body camera licenses for the Police Oversight Panel and funding for community events. There is $240,000 for the advancement of the Reimagining Policing Plan. For this, we added a much-needed victim service specialist who we often hear performs an invaluable service to victims of crime and their families. The Reimagining Plan also calls for the conversion of sworn positions where possible to civilian positions, and this budget starts to do that with 2 positions by creating a property and evidence coordinator position and a civilian armorer position. This will in turn allow the department to reassign a sergeant to the downtown Pearl Street Mall Police Unit, who was previously performing the property and evidence work. There is additional funding for our Safe and Managed Spaces program, also known as SAMPS. This is a multi-departmental program that includes the Ambassador Program, Urban Rangers, and the Boulder targeted homeless engagement and referral effort partnership with the All Road Shelter, also known as Be There. This program helps to foster a climate of safety and security in public spaces. Included in the $1.5 million is one-time funding for the continuation of the Ambassador Program and permanent investments for Urban Rangers staffing. This investment was in part informed by our budget engagement efforts. This advances Citywide Strategic Plan Strategy 1, focusing community safety efforts on reducing community harm at critical locations. For the livable goal, budget highlights include $200,000 for human services funding. That is an additional $100,000 in ongoing funding and $100,000 in one-time funding for additional human services grants for nonprofit organizations, supporting outcomes such as economic stability, mobility, and resilience, and increased positive physical, mental, behavioral health, and well-being. This will allow the city to maintain its current level of funding for competitive grants. There is $315,000 for eviction prevention and rental assistance services, also known as EPRIS. Additional ongoing funding for the city's EPRIS program will support legal aid, rental assistance, and mediation services to help tenants facing eviction. This program prevents evictions for 96% of tenants actively engaging with the EPRIS services. There is an additional $8.9 million in housing affordability investments. The 2025 budget includes over $31 million across multiple funds to support several housing and affordability investments. This includes funding for the construction and rehabilitation of 189 affordable housing units for the Raleigh Flats, Orchard Grove, Grace Commons, Ponderosa, and middle income projects. Included in the 2025 budget and in the out years is an anticipated $3.5 million in revenues to support affordable housing investments from the county's 1B funding. This advances Citywide Strategic Plan Strategy 5, providing holistic and accessible programs and services to enable diverse individuals and families to live in Boulder. Highlights for the Healthy and Socially Thriving goal include $376,000 for equity, access, and community building. This funding is for the creation of a new immigration legal defense fund, public safety training, and cultural competency assessments, in addition to ongoing funding for the Expand program supporting those with disabilities, and grant funds for open space trail repairs and access. There is a total of $1.3 million in additional funding from the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Fund that will support arts programming, administration, and events, such as Bridge Year Arts Grants funding, the Experiments in Public Arts program, event sponsorships, arts administration, the Meadow Music event, Arts in the Parks, and artist hiring incentive grants. The Arts and Culture Office performed a Bridge Year Needs Assessment, receiving input from the community. This input and engagement from the Bridge Year Needs Assessment informed our 2025 arts and culture investments. This additional funding represents an 86% increase over the 2024 approved arts and culture program budget. As previously noted, we realigned $26,000 to support the increase of a bilingual resource school program manager from part-time to full-time, supporting full-time after-school programming for the 4th highest need school in Boulder Valley School District, Crestview Elementary. This advances Strategy 4 to strengthen equity-focused programs that help meet community members' basic needs. And with that, I will turn it over to Tony Townsend to talk about some additional highlights.
Thanks, Scott. Good evening, Council. Tony Townsend, Senior Grants Program Manager. For environmentally sustainable, we're really excited to continue our community wildfire resilience efforts, focusing on reducing risk of wildfire to vulnerable homes and increasing community preparedness with wildfire education and resilience grants. A total of $1.56 million in climate tax funding will support the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, the new Wildfire Resilience Assistance Program, and support the addition of a 2-year fixed-term Wildfire Resilience Project Coordinator, which is the $120,000 enhancement you see here on the slide. With regard to the Wildfire Resilient Assistance Program, this week we officially launched the program, and residents in eligible areas received postcards that were mailed to their homes encouraging them to visit the website to learn more about receiving a detailed home assessment and more about their eligibility. And I want to point out that the total amount of that 1.56 million within climate tax is not all encompassing of our citywide wildfire resilience efforts and operations. It's really like a cross-departmental effort supported by operations and funding throughout open space, fire rescue, and climate initiatives departments. The water quality program within the utilities department includes 130,000 in staffing enhancements, which will support technician work within the water resource recovery facility lab to implement process upgrades to further reduce phosphorus in the wastewater effluent. In addition, the conversion of a fixed term position to permanent staffing will support greenway management efforts such as noxious weed and invasive tree monitoring and removal, ecological support for utilities projects, program development, and coordination with a cross-departmental land manager work group and the Mile High Flood District. For economically vital, additional one-time funding of $200,000 will support the development and implementation of an economic vitality strategy, which was named a key council priority at the 2024 council retreat. And it aims to expand current capacity for small business support, including cultivating strategic partnerships for revitalization, additional business incentives and financial assistance, and enhanced connection to resources and regional economic initiatives. The outdoor dining program began as a pilot program in 2020 with the rapid expansion of outdoor dining during the pandemic. And an outcome from this change shifted business operations and enhanced cultural vibrancy within the downtown districts, including University Hill and the downtown Pearl Street Mall area. Currently, the city has 30 parklets that are predominantly located within those two districts. And with the additional funding of $150,000, the city will be able to purchase 2 additional parklets to expand the programs, and it will support outcomes of enhancing cultural vibrancy as well as maintaining the well assets within the special districts. And both of these items are included as part of the ARPA funding, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. For accessible and connected, key 2025 investments aligned to this goal area include an additional $40,000 in one-time funding for the Community Connectors and Residents Program for mental health services, professional development, and inclusive engagement. $78,000 for increased ongoing funding to advance shared micromobility efforts, including programmatic outreach to ensure awareness and utilization of equity programs and in support of low-income community members. The Transportation and Mobility Department realigned funding for the operation and maintenance of the city's acquisition of 4,500 streetlights, totaling $755,000. And $226,000 of additional funding will support the city's portion of the acquisition of 7 electric buses for the hot bus service and bus stop maintenance, specialized paratransit, and additional initiatives such as annual Walk and Bike Month and Winter Bike to Work Day. With that, I'm going to transition over and speak a little bit about our ARPA funding update and the citywide grant strategy. So the city has expended roughly 68% of the ARPA funds, and the remaining funds will be obligated by the deadline at the end of this year. And we are on track to complete all expenditures by the 2026 deadline. As discussed, the 2025 recommended budget includes $450,000 of one-time funding that extends and expands economic recovery efforts that were initially developed using ARPA funds. This one-time funding will enable support for economic vitality initiatives, including $200,000 for small business support for economic resilience, the $150,000 for the outdoor dining program, as well as $100,000 for experiments in public art. And while the 2025 budget proposes extending these initiatives, the city will continue to evaluate all of our ARPA programs comprehensively And we'll bring forward more information in the 2026 budget development process once we have further understanding of all of the outcomes and the levels of impact from those investments. In terms of our citywide grant strategy, we're focusing on high priority initiatives and critical needs, specifically relating to human services, mental and behavioral health, the high utilizers program, fleet electrification, and other climate resilience and sustainability efforts. So far in 2024, we've received approximately 13 new grant awards totaling $1.85 million for areas such as climate, open space, public safety initiatives, from all kinds of sponsors such as CDOT, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Colorado Energy Office, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and more. We're anticipating direct federal funding from recently announced Dr. Cog EPA award. We have funding coming in from the DOE Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. And we also submitted the IRS Direct Pay Clean Energy Tax Credits for fleet vehicles that were purchased last year. And then next year we'll apply again for more tax credits, which will allow for the fire apparatuses, the EV sweeper, solar, and any other fleet vehicle purchases that happen in this year. And then in addition, our climate department received news that the state recently just received a $20 million award from the Department of Energy, and the city of Boulder anticipates receiving a $4 million subaward under that. So we've had some really, really wonderful successes across many of our departments, and we continue to seek additional grant funding to support the organization. And with that, I'll pass it back to Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Tony. All right, so that brings us to the end of our first section of the presentation for the 2025 recommended budget, and I'll toss it back to Taisha.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is our first opportunity, fellow council members, to ask clarifying questions. So if we can get clarifying questions for the first part one, that would be wonderful. Do I see? Okay, let me go to my little thing. All right, I see Tina. I don't know. Hold on, let me, yeah. Oh,
hi.
That worked.
Oops. Thank you. And thanks for all the information putting together, and also for taking time during the week to answer questions. I had a couple things. The first is this the first year that we don't have an item for the library?
That is a good question. In the 2024 budget, our expenses for the library stopped. And so we shifted and realigned the library funding as part of that process. One of the things that we had in our 2024 budget was anticipated reimbursement for library expenses. And that was a $13 million one-time reimbursement that was included in our budget for the 2024 budget for the existing fiscal year.
So last year's budget was a net revenue from the library of 13 million that we didn't get this year.
That's correct, because we were receiving reimbursement from library expenses that the city was still incurring. And so that was planned reimbursement from the library district.
Okay, so and that just balanced what we were spending in that budget?
Correct, yeah, correct.
Okay, so this budget doesn't have either of those items. Yeah,
that's correct, yeah.
Okay, and then another question is, given some of the changes with property tax at a state level, do we see any issues with further grants coming from our state level partners? Have we heard any indication that existing grant sources might be reduced as they manage the deficit, excuse me?
Based on the property tax legislation?
Yeah.
I do not believe that we have heard any, but might confirm with, see Cara shaking her head. Yes, yeah. We have not heard any update related to that, but Cara, you've come off mute.
Yeah, I would just say we have not to date. It's all very recent, so we may hear things in the future, but to date we have not heard any specifics.
Okay, and then with the feedback from the community connectors and residents, could you remind me how the priorities with that group was done? Was it through focus groups with the communities that they're interacting with, or was it just the community connectors themselves, or a combination?
So last year, we actually performed multiple engagement efforts with the community connectors, and that was our sole focus in the 2024 budget. It did include both direct focus group with the community connector, the smaller community connector, and connectors and residents group. And in addition to that, it was expanded with the community members that they work with. So it included both. This year we built upon that, so it included the same level of engagement with the community connectors themselves, and we intended to share out further with their community members as well. And due to timing and the level of engagement for this year, we really focused on that focus group of community connectors and residents for the 2025 budget, but also recognizing that we were building upon the efforts that we did in 2024 as well.
And
it
how
did
many
include the larger.
Okay. And how many community connectors and residents do we have right now?
So I believe we have 9 currently. I know that there were some vacancies that that they were filling at the time.
Okay. Also, I really appreciated the operating cost pie graph that you showed. Is there a way to get a similar pie that also shades out the number of funds that we're spending that are from dedicated funds, but in that same like high level view of all the funds? So I can sort of see, oh, so of open space, 80% of that fund is from a dedicated tax or from climate initiative, you know, and how much we're supplementing outside of the dedicated tax.
Yes. So we have publicly available on our transparency portal within the 2025 recommended online budget book, there is a way to filter out dedicated funding, dedicated funds such as open space or some of the parks funds or transportation fund, for example. So there is a way to do that. The one complexity that I'll say is we also have dedicated revenue sources that come into the general fund. So there is a way to look at it and slice the data. In looking at general fund specific revenues, we would have to select out particular revenue sources. That is also possible through our transparency portal.
Okay, and my bad for not knowing that I could do that. So I think I missed that. So I didn't dig quite enough. Another question I have is,
Tina, I'm so sorry. I'm going to ask if it's okay because there was a big line, and this is just the first round of questions. So if we can just, because remember there's part 1 of this part, and then there's another part, and so if everybody gives all their things, we're not going to be able to even get all of our questions even entered. So if I can just kindly ask you to hold on that, if I can just get to some of the folks who haven't asked any questions,
sure.
and maybe we can have maybe everyone can do maybe the first 3 burning questions and see how far we can get at least all of our council members to get 1 round of questions in for the part 1, and then we can certainly circle back in part 2. So sorry I didn't announce that frame, but I'm taking track of time, and I can see already that if we continue on this method, we will not be able to proceed. So
yeah, I can follow up by email. So
my
thanks.
apologies. Thank you. No, but it is very helpful. Again, I encourage us to really lift those questions up that we want the others to hear, right? So even just what you shared was really helpful. So again, I don't want to constrain us, but I also want to make sure that we've got enough time and voice for everybody. So thank you. I'll be back. Our mayor, bring it in.
Thanks, Taisha. And thanks everyone for that tag team presentation. It was extremely detailed and incredibly informative. And thanks as well for all the amazing work that you put into the budget as a whole. So I delved into a new item in our budget this year, which was the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Fund. And I just had a couple detailed questions on that. And if you want to get back to me on those, feel free. But I was just looking at the financials for that fund itself. And what I've got in looking at the 2025 recommended budget, that it's got a income of projected income about $3.47 million. And it has a reserve amount of about $300,000. And I was just wondering what the targeted total reserve what is for this new fund.
So the targeted reserve for new funds across the organization is a best practice financial policy that we have of 16.7%. And so the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Fund was developed utilizing that principle.
Sorry, did you say 60%?
16.7.
16.7. Okay, gotcha. I thought 60% sounded high. And so what does that work out to somewhere in the $600,000 kind of range, maybe?
I would need to look at the fund financial and get back, but
maybe just follow up on that one if you don't mind. I'm just curious what our destination is there. And then my other question about that was it also shows an ending fund balance after reserves of about $400,000. And I was just wondering why we were contemplating that additional fund balance instead of spending that money in 2025.
I appreciate the question. So the one-time 1.3 million in additional arts, culture, and heritage funding that is above the 1.5 million base was based on the bridge year needs assessment that the Arts and Culture Office performed. This was based on the engagement efforts that they performed with several stakeholders, including their existing arts operating grants. They also performed engagement with community connectors and residents. And the one-time investments in 2025 is intentional based on this feedback that they received. It's also intentional knowing that the Arts and Culture Office is planning on performing a cultural plan update over the next year. And so they're looking to reevaluate their funds. And the fund balance after reserves is related to that, and the one-time nature of the funds within the 2025 budget is also related to that.
Okay, thanks for those answers. That's all I had.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Bring it in, Council Member Matt Benjamin.
Appreciate that, Taisha. I'll just sort of share the accolades. Great work considering these are hard times. So thanks for the thoughtfulness to try not to make sure anybody really got cut and to try to find balance. That is threading a really difficult needle. So just appreciate the work there. My question centers around our synergies with the county. We have a number of programs and services that we fund sort of in concert with them, shelter being one and some of the other services we have. And so my question is, has staff heard anything about the county's budgeting process and how it may impact us if programs are funded perhaps less, and are we going to need to make up the difference? I'm just a little concerned and just want to know how that might impact some of the programs and services our community is depending on, and if we've heard anything from the county about how that might play out.
I'm happy to I'm happy to jump in, and maybe Kurt, if you have additional information, but I will say that we have heard a little bit of that. I believe the county has been talking to providers over some time now that they will be needing to cut, and what we hear is about 35% of their human services community partnership fund. Kurt, correct me if that's wrong, because that's a new name. It used to be the Human Services Safety Net Fund, I believe. And we understand and a little concerned about how that may impact our services, but we don't know yet what the impact of that will be, but we know certainly that will impact our shelter, our All Roads shelter as we think about that. So we will be looking to speak to the county and really dig in on how that could impact our services. Kurt, if you know more, please feel free to share.
Yeah, that was a great summary. So Kurt Fernhopper, Director of Housing and Human Services. The only thing that I would add is it's several organizations, many of which we also fund, and the county or the city is a little further along in their budgeting process than the county is, as I understand it, and the 35% is sort of a target number that's been given to many service providers. We don't know yet what the impact will be on those service providers. And we'll probably be learning more about that as the county develops their budget further.
Thanks for that response. I guess the question is, will we be finalizing our budget? I'm just sort of wondering timing. Will we get some clarity from the county before we sort of sign, seal, deliver our budget? In which case there could be an adjustment if there was a need or desire, or are we completely out of cycle?
I believe our budget finalizes before theirs does. And so what I can tell you is that we will make an effort to reach out to the county and see if we can get some clarity. And we will bring that back to you as soon as we know.
Okay. My other question kind of circles back to the county a little bit. I think there was a slide that mentioned that there was money we had set aside for Measure 1B. And I'm sort of similarly curious, do we have an update on where that process is and how what can we expect from 1B, certainly given that we're going to make a commitment towards some money in this next budget cycle? I'd just like to know kind of where we're at and what we can expect going forward.
I appreciate that question. I'm going to invite Kurt to give you more of a detail because he has been really working with the staff from sort of our regional cities to work on what that looks like. There are several proposals in the mix. I'll say the managers and town administrators have been talking about that. We will continue to talk with the county on it. But Kurt, if you can give an update on where some of those proposals are landing.
Sure. So about 3 months ago, the Regional Housing Partnership, which is made up of staff members who work in affordable housing and related services in the different municipalities, work together to come up with a proposal on or a recommendation on how those funds could be distributed from a process standpoint. And since then, a updated proposal has been given to the county. I'm aware there's a couple other proposals that have been put together by county staff. And we're told that the county commissioners will be looking at those various proposals and that a final decision will be made about the first week in December. In our current budget, we have put in $3.5 million in expectation of 1B funding into the affordable housing budget. That is a conservative number. We believe that the number should hopefully be higher than that.
Thanks for that update. Appreciate that, Kurt. Thanks, Nuria.
All right. Thank you kindly, Matt. Moving on to Councilmember Mark Wallet. Bringing in Mark.
Okay. I want to join the general accolades for staff and what they've done. This is an extraordinary document, and I just can't imagine how much work must have gone into it. So kudos. I only have 3 questions, although each one has 6 subparts, but I'll try to be brief. If we lose $3 million in real estate revenue in 2026, have we given even the remotest thought as to what kind of adjustments we'll need to make, or is it too soon for that?
If we lose $3 million in ongoing revenue?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yeah,
we
would look at the possibility of losing up to $3 million, if I recall one of the early charts based on the
for property taxes. Yeah. So this is something that is recent for we have been following the legislation associated with property taxes, and have been performing estimates during regular session and during the special session as well. And so these estimates are recent. We are concerned about the drop in property tax revenues beginning in 2026. It is, as we've shared before, a major revenue source for the city. And so this would be something that we would really need to understand and take a further look at as part of the 2026 development process.
Mark, do you mind if I colloquy on that?
Oh, that's unacceptable. Yes, certainly.
All right. But Charlotte, to clarify, my understanding is that it wouldn't be a decrease of $3 million of revenue, but that we would go up 3 million less than we would have otherwise, but it would still be a net increase in property tax revenue. Do I have that correct?
You have that correct for the increase amount. One of the things that I pointed out on the graph that we showed was the budgeted amounts that we have across the 6-year period through 2030. When we are budgeting, we look at a multi-year process and look at our ongoing expenses that we have against our ongoing revenues. And we did not account for that in our 2025 development process. And so it's something that we are definitely going to need to take another look at in more detail and dive into our estimates that we shared earlier.
Yeah, not to say it won't have a significant impact, but just to clarify, it's not actually going down. Right. Thank you.
This year, we're looking at a pretty substantial increase in debt service, with over $300 million in unfunded financing needs for projects. What's the level of concern about this kind of increase in debt service going forward, and subsequent increases as we try to address some of these needs?
So the planned debt service that we have at just over $10 million in the 2025 budget has been planned for multiple years, and that's specific to the utilities capital investments that we have for utilities projects for the South Boulder Creek flood mitigation project, as well as the Alpine Balsam Western City Campus project that we'll speak to more in detail in the second section of the presentation. But this was something that we have planned for several years as part of in particular for Alpine Balsam, the consolidation of city offices into that building over the next several years. And we have planned those expenses and built those in over the past couple of years in terms of that $6.2 million in debt service.
Okay, and my last question, absolutely last. The budget showed that we've got about $718 million in budgeted expenses against $618 million in revenue. And when I asked you about that, you said that a lot of that gap is going to be filled by one-time investments that, quote, primarily draw from fund balance across 41 budgeted funds. So my question is, what kind of impact are we going to have? Is that going to have on our fund balances? And are we using those fund balances basically to finance daily operations at this point?
It's a good question, and I appreciate you pointing it out. One of the things to consider as part of the 100 million draw that you see within the 2025 budget, it is really due to in much of the draw is due to capital project investments that we have. And so that draw is inclusive of capital project funds and expenses associated with capital projects. And many of those capital projects are funded on an annual basis with current revenue. So that is part of that draw that you see on the snapshot that you're seeing for the 2025 budget, I did share the 6-year horizon for our 6-year capital improvement program. And that is something that we work on an annual basis, and know that capital project managers are working on that throughout the year, to take a look at our plans for capital projects, our funding availability that does take in consideration our fund balance available, as well as the current revenue that's coming in to help support the advancement of those capital projects.
Just one, do you know what our fund balance across those 41 budgeted funds is in total? What are the resources available to us?
I would need to take a look at the exact amount. I think that we've got that available, but need to take a look at the total amount, but know that we consider the fund balances, the available fund balances on an annual basis as part of our budgeting process. And so we're very intentional about planning on a multi-year horizon for balancing our expenses and our revenues and planned expenses associated with both the operating budget as well as the capital budget, which includes the advancement of those capital projects.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Would I ask you to get back to me on that last question?
Yes. Yep.
Back to us. all of us, I think, would benefit from the answer to that question, Mark. So
that is
put that in.
Correct response. Thank you. I missed
kindly and boop, boop, boop. That's all your time. Any other questions? If we can circle back, that would be wonderful. Want to catch Lauren's question, and we may even have some time to circle back to Tina for some additional questions that she had, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay.
I'll keep it short. Thanks, Taisha. So my question is mostly around the budget questionnaire. Is that a statistically valid survey?
It is not a statistically valid survey, no.
And I think you had mentioned that, you know, and looking at different categories and how people rank things, that renters ranked livability as #1.
Correct.
What percentage are renters in our community?
I'm gonna see if I've got
yeah, we need some. We call a friend. Where our friends at?
On a friend, I see Brad. Brad
got lots of friends in the background.
Yeah,
bring it in.
I'll take a first effort at that. The number I hear frequently cited, council member, is about 60% of our households are rental. And I'll turn to Kurt for any refinement on that.
Yeah, I don't have the exact number in front of me. We could get back to you on that, but I am in agreement with Brad that that's certainly within the range of what we know.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. So a majority of some amount is rentals.
Can I colloquy on that question? Just clarify. Is that the number of, is that by people or by units?
That's household, so essentially units.
Okay.
Can I colloquy also on that? I just kind of following up with that, just the timing of the survey was April and May, which is when the CU students, which are I think 37% of the city and are almost all renters, may not have been engaged because that's when finals and commencement are the first week of May. So just sort of, I don't know if there's a way to think about the survey, understanding that that part of the population may have been uniquely not engaged, but I don't know the answer. It's just a comment. Sorry.
Thank you so
and
much.
If I can just
I'm
interject.
sorry, I'm sorry, that's you, Brad.
I was going to just say, hot off the press, the actual numbers are 54% renter households and 46% owner.
Awesome. Thank you. And might I ask maybe just a compilation of some of these responses to the various questions that have been presented for the evening would be very helpful in the follow-up line that I know that you all are planning to prepare anyway. So thank you. Lauren, did you have anything else? I know you said the one, but just in case.
Well, I guess I was just wondering if there, this data was presented, but I know prior to our current council, I think it was back when we were looking at the sustainability tax stuff, we had some statistically valid surveys around priorities of community members. And so I was just wondering if we could share out that data so we can kind of understand better the differences between kind of statistically valid results. And I know it's not quite the same questions, but it might help give a broader understanding.
Yeah, we can certainly follow up on that.
Thank you kindly.
Carol Nealon, I'll take that action and circulate that via hotline.
Awesome. Thank you kindly. Tina, we're coming back to you. We've got about 5 more minutes for this section of the council clarifying questions. So if you have them, we would love to hear
them. No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Now I'm looking to see if I have any questions. One, it was wonderful to see the alignment. Kudos always. I love money because we've all agreed that 0 and 0 is 0 and 1 is 1. I did have a question about the outcomes. So I noticed that, and I very much appreciate the outcomes direction to outcomes-based budgeting. However, because we're in the middle of that transition and only have really one data point, and not all of those data points are outcome driven. There are actually quite a few, I would argue maybe even the majority are output driven. So the cost of versus changed behavior. So because we don't have that as much outcome data, I'm curious if where we can go for more outcomes data from a programmatic perspective related to Health and Human Services, for example, and some of the other programs that we know have outcomes data available.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's something that we as an organization have been working on, as you mentioned, over the past 3 years. And so we're really excited to be able to build upon this effort. We recognize that when we look at the data in the dashboard that's now publicly available, that to Scott's point that we shared earlier, we previously only had 25 targets submitted for 2023. And when we look at our data that was submitted for 2024 and for 2025, we're anticipating about 230 targets and actuals. And so what this demonstrates is that buildup and development of this work across the board, but know that some of the departments and program areas have been on different paths, and the housing investments and human services investments are particularly one that has been working on this for a while. And I see Elizabeth's popped up if you want to add anything, Elizabeth, to that, Deputy Director of
And again,
HHS.
just to clarify my question, where can I go to get program level data or outcomes data at the program level? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Just a couple of examples, and Councilmember Adams, let me know if we're kind of hitting the question right or not in the answer. Couple different examples. Some of the longer term outcomes, as you know, some of them are generational, right? When we're measuring health, et cetera. And so
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I'm going to just come in and say, I'm not asking you to tell me what they are. I'm asking where can we go as a council, because the information is not available in the outcomes information that we have right now. So if there, and again, I don't even, in the follow-up, if there's maybe a section that has some hyperlinks to some different reports that we can take a look at, I think that could be one of the ways as we are making this Herculean effort. And again, I have seen your logic model. I know this information is there, but again, information is only as good as our ability to actually look at it. So I would love for us to be able to compile what we do have program by program, and be able to make that available for our thing.
Sure. A couple of, so as you know, we do have outcome data that comes to us in the form of grant reports. It's one way, and we can make those available anytime. A couple of other program, just examples within HHS. We have the homelessness services dashboard actually does provide outcome data when we're talking about the number of people who are not only exiting homelessness and getting into housed, but staying housed. The eviction prevention program also has really good, there are lots of outputs there, as you note, but there's also outcome data. When we're talking about if our outcomes are preventing evictions, we do have that information available on dashboards. So we do have several different examples of a combination of, you know, moment by moment output numbers and some of that outcome data. And more than happy to provide a more comprehensive list or
that would be
response
wonderful.
with some
A
of those links and
comprehensive list
documents.
would be really wonderful with links. So I don't want PowerPoints with different slides that we have to toggle between, but one list. It would be absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Can I colloquy on this?
Yes, you can.
So I'm just feeling like I'm having deja vu. I thought my understanding was that this sort of the outcomes per project in HHS along with costs was something that was going to be coming forward to us, because I thought that was something that had been requested a while back.
It has been. It was requested by me, and it was requested at the HHS, the study session that we had, and we were told that there was going to be a report. However, we are now at a place where we need to make financial decisions, and so in lieu of waiting for this report, if we can just have what we have, if we can get what we have. But to your question, I would be curious to know if that report would be available before we need to make decisions about our budget.
Kurt might want to jump in here as well, specific to homelessness, but that is coming up in December, I believe. And Kurt or others want to jump in on the other
thing, right, Elizabeth?
I'm sorry, what?
Is that after we approve our budget?
That's after the budget, yes.
Yeah, so then
Kurt,
we'll need to have the program by program information before. Okay, thank you. Kurt, do you have anything to add?
I think Elizabeth did a great job with that.
Thank you.
Some of the things that we're able to provide outcomes on, we have, and we can share those links to those programs that have that. We're not going to have outcomes for every program.
No,
I think we've developed the outcomes that we can at this point in time.
Absolutely.
And we can look at developing those further over time as well.
Thank you so much.
I think you had also asked for cost per program. That is on our dashboard. It's been on there for about 2 or 3 months. It's a new addition to our dashboard.
Okay, wonderful. If that link could be added to that list, that would be wonderful. So thank you so much. I'm running low on my time. I have another 1.5 minutes on my 7-minute question allocation. I had a question about alignment to council priorities. And so, again, not for response at this moment, but it would be wonderful to get some information on how does this budget align to the priorities that we had identified? It's just something that I had a question around. And then my last question is around racial equity. And so I've seen this word written, but I'm not seeing it in the budget anywhere. And so again, not necessarily for a big response right now, but it would be really wonderful. Yes, to see where the investments are made around racial equity. When it is mentioned, it's usually in conjunction with other things that are outside of that scope for one budget line. And I can give examples in our one-on-one next week, one-to-one next week. But would love to just hear a little bit now, and then of course a longer explanation later would be wonderful.
That sounds good. Appreciate the question. So I would say, as part of our efforts for outcome-based budgeting, we are aligning to the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework, and that is a key pillar of our alignment for understanding the investments that we have as an organization. with this effort that we have performed over the past 3 years, we are really looking to center and build upon equity considerations that we have embedded in our annual budget development process. The other thing that I would mention is that we've been very intentional about our community engagement efforts that we began just last year in 2024. Prior to that, to my knowledge, I do not believe that we've been performing community engagement, and we intentionally engaged and lifted up the input and the partnership that we have developed with the community connectors and residents in particular, and hearing their feedback of the objectives within the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework, and sharing that information with them and hearing their priorities, that has become a key pillar in our decision-making process for our budgeting process that started last year, and we're continuing that this year as well.
Okay, thank you. So I look forward to something that lets me know what are the specific investments in racial equity. And I as I was looking through everything, I haven't found anything, nothing. So I look forward to getting more clarification around that. All right, we are now, we got 4 minutes. All right, proceed with part 2.
Sounds good. All right, let me get resituated here. So we will share out the capital improvement program as well as our efforts on our long-term financial strategy. All right, everybody's seeing everything okay? Great. So focusing on our capital improvement program as the next section for the 2025 budget. I shared a very high-level overview of our capital improvement program earlier in the presentation, but wanted to be sure to share out some of the key projects that we have within our 2025 to 2030 capital improvement program. And so just again, when we look at the 6-year horizon, we see planned spending of $807.4 million included in the 6-year CIP, and that is spread across multiple departments and multiple capital funds, as well as special revenue funds and governmental funds. And in the 2025 budget are seeing most of the investments stemming from utilities, facilities, and fleet and transportation. We have 5 distinct capital project types. You'll see this breakdown of the CIP with capital enhancement, capital maintenance, capital planning studies, land acquisition, and new facility and infrastructure. What you see here is that we have 86% of the CIP that goes toward the maintenance and enhancements of our capital infrastructure across the city. And when we look and think about our budget direction for 2025, one of the key pieces associated with this was performing ongoing capital maintenance funding and having sustainable capital maintenance funding, thinking about the underfunded needs that we have across the organization, particularly thinking about the results that were brought forward in the facilities master plan, for example, and some of the underfunded and unfunded needs that we'll share in a bit as well. So looking at our capital project highlights, we will walk through just a handful of capital projects that are included in the 6-year CIP. We have, as I shared earlier, over 200 capital projects, and so won't be able to touch on each of those tonight, but know that they're available and represented within the publicly available 2025 recommended budget. And so first, sharing the efforts and project for the East Boulder Community Center. These are, this is advancing our investments associated with the renovation and the retrofit, Duke Energy retrofit at the East Boulder Community Center. This funding is supported by the recently renewed CCRS, Community Culture Resilience and Safety Tax, that was renewed by voters in 2021. And the investments here are focused on providing opportunities for community members to recreate and maintain a healthy and active lifestyle. We see the total project cost is $53 million. That's included in starting this year in 2024 and is anticipated to be complete in 2027. And those start with engagement efforts that have just begun with the future of rec centers and thinking about the recreation system as a whole with community engagement efforts that will continue through the fall, energy assessments and modeling analysis, as well as implementation and construction. And again, we anticipate completing this renovation in 2027. The Alpine Balsam Western City Campus project that we mentioned earlier is a site that is focused on the development of the city's Western City campus that will consolidate existing city facilities into one city campus. It will also have affordable housing at the Alpine Balsam site in north central Boulder between Alpine and Balsam. This investment will result in the city's largest affordable housing project to date, with 144 new affordable housing units. What you'll see in the 2025 recommended capital budget, as well as in the 6-year CIP, is $40 million in appropriation that will go to support project costs, as well as the $6.2 million that I mentioned earlier in our operating budget overview for anticipated debt issuance that will begin in 2025. This debt issuance, as well as the related appropriation of $100 million that we're anticipating, will come forward for council review in Q1 of 2025. Fire stations 2 and 4 are included in the CIP, and these are replacements of existing fire stations that are past their operational lifespans. They're too small to be equipped with the appropriate apparatuses. They lack appropriate gender neutral and fitness spaces and are costly to continue to maintain due to poor building conditions. And so this investment is a key investment in the operations of the fire rescue department and helping replace these two stations 2 and 4, and included in the CIP, you'll see across the 6-year period is $38 million for the design and construction of both stations. University Hill streetscape renovations is included as a capital project in the 2025 capital budget. There's a total of $1.4 million supported by one-time funds. And the investments that will go toward this project include transformation of medians with drought-resistant vegetation, some artistic elements, improved lighting, upgraded alleyways, diverse landscaping solutions. And these investments are really intended to support improvements in the University Hill area and will plan to begin next year. Primos Park and the Violet Bridge project are another key community project that is included in the 6-year CIP. This includes looking at investments in park amenities at a 9-acre neighborhood park on Violet Avenue between Broadway and 19th Streets. This is specifically adjacent to the North Boulder Branch Library and the Boulder Meadows Manufactured Home Community. And it includes a bridge replacement that is much needed along the Violet Avenue and will invest in new multimodal bridge investments, as well as a new pedestrian underpass and improved connections to the adjacent neighborhoods. And finally, looking at the major investments associated with utilities capital projects. We have the Barker Water System Rehabilitations projects, a total of 54.4 million that is included in the CIP, and the Barker Water System includes multiple water rehabilitation projects, including the Barker Gravity Pipeline that's listed here and Barker Dam Outlet Works. And this is really critical to maintain the city's water supply for water demands. The main sewer improvements phase 2 project is included in the 6-year CIP for a total of 9.7 million. And the main sewer conveys most of the wastewater from the Boulder community to the water resource recovery facility. And this project will construct a new sanitary sewer line, as well as perform some rehabilitation of existing lines. And the reconstruction will support the city's wastewater infrastructure, as well as provide resiliency during future flooding events. And finally, we've spoken to this earlier in the presentation, but the South Boulder Creek flood mitigation is included. The debt service associated with this project is included in the operating budget, and we anticipate bringing forward to council in 2025 approval for appropriation of 63 million, as well as the debt approval associated with the municipal bond. And the South Boulder Creek flood mitigation project is currently in the 90% design and permitting phase stage. So turning to our funding outlook and future planning and long-term financial strategy that was indicated as a key council priority earlier in the 2024 council retreat, I'll speak first to some of the unfunded needs that we have shared with council previously. We shared a shorter list of unfunded needs at our May financial forecast and have rounded out that list and shared that out with council members. And look to continue to refine this as part of the long-term financial strategy. So when we look at our unfunded and underfunded investments across the organization, we recognize that we have significant unfunded and underfunded needs. I'll also point out that over the past couple of years, we have made recent investments advancing key community priorities. Some of these, for example, include our behavioral health services, our day services center, but still recognizing the amount of investments that we have made over the past couple of years, our unfunded and underfunded needs are still great. On the right-hand side, you can see a handful of investments here, including our recreation centers, our maintenance backlog for our city buildings that we spoke to earlier, for our arterial network, some of our affordable housing funds, advanced life support system within the fire rescue department broadband system, for example. And so what we are estimating currently when we compile our unfunded needs is a total of 380 million, both in capital investments as well as ongoing operational funding. And so what this really points to is the re-emphasis and need for a long-term financial strategy for the city. So reminding us again of the efforts for the long-term financial strategy and the reasons for the long-term financial strategy, we are building upon the foundational reports that came out several years ago, the Blue Ribbon Commission reports that pointed to our current state, and we are working to develop this future state as part of the long-term financial strategy. Where do we sit for our current state? We are at 68% of our revenues that are dedicated, and what that means for us as an organization is it means that we have reduced flexibility to address needs of the moment. What does the future state look like with a long-term financial strategy? We're looking to increase our flexibility of funding to be able to meet emerging and changing needs. Current state is looking at our unfunded and underfunded core city services, some of our funding sources expiring, for example, and difficulty to ensure reliability. Our future state will look to increase reliability through establishing guiding principles, revenue identification, and then community prioritization to be able to meet service level demands. Finally, under current state, our recent practice has focused on short-term decisions without a strategy for revenue approaches and tax renewals, particularly in the buildup back after the pandemic. And so what we're looking to perform as part of this long-term financial strategy is to help us focus more holistically and comprehensively to support core service levels and community needs. And finally, what are some of the efforts that we have structured within the long-term financial strategy? First, we're looking to establish a long-term financial plan that we have already begun the work on. What will this plan identify and develop? It will help develop outline guiding principles, perform a current state assessment, recommend updates to our financial policies and commitments to best practices, and outline future strategic action steps. We have already begun this work and aim to finalize this in the fall of this year, which will help to serve as a strategic planning document to help guide the financial strategy forward for the organization. As part of the long-term financial strategy, we'll also conduct a comprehensive fee inventory and study, and this really aims to identify the true cost of service levels and establish citywide policies and practices related to fees and fee updates. We will plan to begin work this fall on an inventory of current fees as well as methodologies, and assess and prioritize fee updates and determine our needs for fee studies. And we anticipate completing this work by Q2 of 2025. We're looking to define our core service levels, and this is really to be able to understand the service level requirements across the organization. We spoke to, and I shared the examples of some of our unfunded and underfunded needs, and we recognize our limited funding availability. And so this will help us identify the levels that we are looking to support as part of our long-term financial strategy. We will explore alternative funding mechanisms to look to support those core service levels and community needs. This action step will include analyzing our funding mechanisms, our researching our funding opportunities, and identifying strategic revenue sources and opportunities for us to consider. We'll begin this work in the fall of this year with the goal of completing this in 2025. We're looking to refine our citywide financial policies. This is something that is underway that we began earlier this year as part of the long-term financial plan. And this will help to support our guiding principles as part of the long-term financial plan. And we anticipate completing this as part of that effort. And then finally, we will develop a ballot measure strategy for 2025 and 2026. And this effort will include both working with in the Financial Strategy Committee as well as Council review in the 2025 ballot measures planning process, as well as our 2026 annual budget discussions process. And all of these components have are also inclusive of engagement efforts with our core service levels and ballot measure strategy, for example. So what are the next steps in looking at the 2025 budget calendar? We are now at our council study session, heading toward budget readings and adoption for October 3rd and 17th. One of the things that we recognize, as we mentioned earlier, is that this budget that is brought to you is balanced. And so there is a recommended process for council budget changes that Financial Strategy Committee will point to. Our first reading packet will be due to council September 25th. And so what we are recommending in terms of a deadline for any requested council changes to be sent to budget staff by Monday, September 23rd. And with that, I will share our council question and hand it back to Taisha.
Awesome. First, we're actually going to do any clarifying questions for the capital improvement program or the long-term financial strategy. And then we will move on to any kind of macro, not micro, not line by line item, but macro level initial adjustments, thoughts, or recommendations. So would love to start with those who did not speak in section 1 for questions. Tara, I see your hand up.
Well, I might not be putting in this in the right place or at the right night.
If it's not a clarifying question, then it's going to have to wait till a minute later. So is it a clarifying question?
I don't know. I could wait.
All right.
I'm not sure. Maybe I don't even
All right,
know.
give it to me. Give me the clarifying question. What do you think it is?
My clarifying question is when or do we ever get to talk about the most expensive CIP project we have, which is Alpine Balsa? Because I get a lot of requests from community members that basically say, why are we doing this when we're on a constrained budget? All I want to say is, if you have to shop at Nordstrom Rack versus Nordstrom's and you're on a tight budget, you pick Nordstrom Rack. So when do I get to ask that question? Is it a different night? Is it later? Is it never?
Charlotte? This is an excellent question, Tara. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to respond, and I can start us off. And I know we've got staff available as well if we are interested in detail around the project. But this is something that has been brought forward and planned for multiple years. We have intentionally included the debt service and planned for the debt service for multiple years associated with this project, and have been working toward funding this effort, knowing that it is a consolidation of existing buildings and existing operations and maintenance associated with our city offices, our existing city offices. And so know that this is something that has been developed for many years. And I will toss it off to Michelle if interested in.
Well, hold on. I know it's been talked, I've waited a long time to talk about it today. I should have talked about it years ago, but it's the problem. That's true. The problem is, you know, we listen to all this talk about inflation and costs are so much higher for materials. And so I'm getting more and more nervous every year. So I figured, why not this year talk about it? But I realize why, but a lot of people are questioning it, not just me. So
Tara,
I realize what the party line is, though.
Do you mind if I add this? No, it's not. No need to apologize. It was a valid question, and now we're moving into comments. So if we can just circle back when we get to comments on how you feel about that, that would be amazing. So thank you so much. Matt and Tina, I see you, but I'm going to go ahead and get us to Nicole, because Nicole has not asked or answered any question, and then we will go back to those who have asked the previous question. Nicole.
Thank you. I think that mine are relatively quick. I had one question just about the long-term financial strategy. I was just wondering, staff, if you could remind me, and sorry, first of all, thanks for the presentation. Haven't had a chance to say that yet. With the long-term financial strategy, I believe we had talked about doing some community engagement around that and trying to get a sense of what the community would like us to fund. And I was just wondering if you could just, in like 1 or 2 sentences, just remind me where we are with that process.
We are still under development with the process, and so that is something that we anticipate sharing as we get that timeline further refined, but that will absolutely be considered as part of the process.
Thank you. And then my other question was just about the capital improvement spending. And so basically we're doing a lot of catch up because we haven't done that for the last few decades, if I'm continuing to understand correctly. But moving forward, all of the kind of basic maintenance is being included in the budget, right? Like as we take care of one of these things, are we then incorporating and rolling maintenance into the ongoing budget that we're thinking about so that we're not going to end up in this place again?
It's a good question. And I would say one of the things that we were very intentional about doing in terms of our budget direction for this year and strategically placing some of our both our ongoing and one-time investments was in capital maintenance funding. And so I would say we are still working to catch up on that. We are intentional about including that in our planning and budgeting process moving forward, but I would say that we are still trying to catch up on that.
Thank you.
All right, Matt Benjamin, you're up next.
If you're doing first timers, I see Ryan's hand up, so I'll pass it to him before taking a second bite at the apple.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see you. Sorry, Ryan, bring it in.
Thanks both. I just have one question, but first, I know this is a relatively new team, and Charlotte, Stacy, and Scott, you give an impression that you've been doing this for some time. So well done on all this, all the underlying analysis, and then the presentation. So my question is just about the it's sort of about long-term strategies. And I'm thinking about the strategic framework that was discussed earlier, the strategic plan, in which we're moving towards more outcome-based budgeting, with the idea in part that this is a way to do more with less with our funds, to be more deliberate about what we want to achieve for the resources. And so I'm just wondering if there are any examples that you can share, maybe early examples of investments that we're making where we're able to start to see that we're starting to see the greater impact for less resources. And I understand it might be a little early, but I have to ask. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, Ryan. And I would say we were intentional about looking across our outcomes as part of the budgeting process, even recognizing and knowing that we do not have yet targets and measures associated, or targets and data specifically associated with those outcomes, and looking at the intended outcomes across all of our program areas. And we were interested in looking at potential synergies there. And so know that that was embedded as part of our budgeting process for this year, and will continue to be embedded as part of the process. And we are able to have that transparency and shared understanding across the organization and across program areas of what those intended outcomes are. And so that'll help us reallocate or allocate our funding based on those outcomes that have been developed across program areas.
Right. Thank you so much. And now, Matt.
Thanks, Tasha. My question centers around the CCRS contribution to our CIP program. And in particular, I'm just sort of curious because it's sort of on the city's website, and you previewed some of them. All but one of those projects is slated to be completed in 2030, yet the tax has been extended to 2036. And so I'm just wondering if you could remind us of the process from which we define the projects that are funded by the CCRS tax for that really next 6 years, and when and where does that happen, and how do we go about defining the projects for that basically next half of that money?
Thank you for the question. Appreciate the question on CCRS. So one of the things that we are really excited.
Point of clarification, Charlotte, do you mind unpacking CCRS for those of us who are and listeners who may not know what that is?
Absolutely. So CCRS means Community Culture, Resilience, and Safety Tax. It is a tax that was approved by voters in November of 2021. This was an extension of an existing sales and use tax specific for capital infrastructure projects. It was originally approved by voters, I believe, in 2014, and then extended again in 2017. And part of the 90% of the tax goes toward funding city projects, and 10% of that per ballot language actually is supporting nonprofit capital expenses. And we have developed a robust program associated with that particular 10% of nonprofit support, and our city projects for the CCRS tax that was recently renewed in 2021 is going to support several key projects that have been underfunded in prior years. These were projects that were identified as key community priority projects. Many of them were included within the ballot language for CCRS. And one of the things that we are excited about in the advancement of these projects in particular is that we are utilizing our funds, much of our funds, to be able to advance these projects early. You'll notice in our published fund financials for the fund, we are anticipating accelerating our projects using debt in 2026 to help support some of those key projects. And so those that's the reason for the acceleration of the projects that you see within and supported by that tax.
I appreciate the overview on that, Charlotte. My question was around how can we define what's the process from which we define the next round of projects? Because most or all of those projects that are currently slated, they're slated to be completed prior to 2030, and yet the tax goes to 2036. So I'm just sort of wondering, when do we go about defining that next crop of projects? Because obviously we talked about unfunded needs. We talked about there's a lot of projects hanging out there, more rec centers, a lot of things. So I'm just sort of curious, when do we start that process of defining that next batch of projects?
The annual budget process is certainly the place where that discussion would occur. So all of the requests across the board would come forward during the annual budget process.
Okay.
And
all right.
And are we in that process, Charlotte? Like, are we still in play? Are you speaking of like the March to June?
Correct. Yeah. So the
Okay.
annual budget. Yeah. Good question. The timeline for the annual budget process is typically March to June. So that would begin next year for the 2026 budget development.
Okay.
And I see Kara's come off mute as well.
Hi, thank you. I thought I just might clarify too that with the ballot measure, we also did ask for voter approval to issue debt. And that was very intentional because we knew that there was a need to complete these projects. And the sooner we complete them, the more we will minimize the total cost of actually doing the project because of project inflation. And so we are intending to use that authorization to issue the debt, as Charlotte noted, in 2026. And so in fact, I think most of the projects will be done early, and the later years of the tax may be mostly supporting the debt service, and then the 10% for the nonprofits. So there might not be a big later tranche of projects because we're advancing projects early in the tax period.
Okay, that clarifies it for me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Anything else, Matt? All right, moving on to Mark Wallace. Bring it in.
Okay, I only have one question, and I'm not trying to get back into the Alpine Balsam discussion. I just have a question. My understanding is that there's going to be sale of some market rate lots to help finance the project. Is that going to be a reduction? Is that going to against the 40 million in city funds and $100 million in certificates of participation, or are those proceeds designated for some other purpose?
Yeah, good question. We did not, I believe, clarify this in the memo, but we do have anticipated proceeds from the housing development that is included and anticipated as revenues to help support the project. So we have already included that in our estimates for repayment. We have also included in the out years revenues associated with sale of buildings, and we've also included some anticipated grant and rebate revenues that will help support the project costs.
So we still have net, we still have $140 million to go.
That total is supported in part by reimbursement and additional revenues that are not city revenues.
So it could be a lower amount at the end of the day.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I got.
All right, thank you kindly. Mayor Brock.
Thanks, Taisha. Just a quick question that you can get back to me with, which is how can we learn more about the details of the Violet Bridge replacement project and the associated transportation improvements?
I anticipate those will come forward as soon as the project planning begins, and know that the efforts for Primos Park has started, and that is a cross-departmental effort. And we can circle back on the details of the plans for that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd be interested in learning some more about exactly what it's going to entail. Thanks so much. That's all I got.
All right. Any other clarifying questions for folks? Okay, I will just jump in and say, so I love this spreadsheet, and it's very hard to like, organize it. And I'm curious if, and it seems like there's one piece that's missing, and it would be really helpful. Like I've noticed some, there's a lot around the water infrastructure, major infrastructure, but I think it would just be helpful for me to know a little bit more about like how are these in service again to either the SIR or the council priorities. It just seems like a list of really important projects, but to some of my colleagues' earlier points, as we're thinking about some of the challenges financially ahead, it would be helpful. So is there another layer potentially or column that lets us know, how this particular, like for example, civic area maybe some, versus, or park refresh versus infrastructure versus transportation. Like it just would be really helpful to get some bigger categories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a great question. And one of the things that we can consider to do to build upon is add that level of detail into the budget that when you go into the capital improvement program summary within our budget, as you're mentioning, does not contain that level of detail. And so that's something that we can definitely take back as feedback to build upon moving forward.
Awesome, thank you. And then for the pavement improvement, does that include like sidewalks?
I am unsure, but see our transportation
thank you
colleagues coming up.
Good evening. My name is Garrett Slater, and I am the Capital Projects Manager for Transportation and Mobility. And portions of our pavement management program do incorporate sidewalk repairs. It's primarily the curb ramps at intersections, which are not in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA standards and guidelines, where we are implementing those improvements. We also have an additional line item in the Transportation and Mobility CIP specifically targeted at sidewalk improvement around the city. So we have a couple of different ways that we tackle pedestrian infrastructure in the CIP.
Okay, I would love for me and my colleagues to get a little bit more information around around what you're sharing on the sidewalks. And then my follow-up question is, was the Center for People with Disabilities engaged in conversations around just sidewalk accessibilities related to this budget during the budget process?
Not as part of the budget process, but what I will say is that we interact and work with the Center for People with Disabilities frequently throughout the course of our project work and our program development. So it might not have happened explicitly with the budget development, but it happens as we look to where we want to prioritize our efforts and our resources. So it is an ongoing point of coordination through our annual efforts.
Okay. And so during those times, you spoke specifically about budget and budget allocations?
With the Center for...
Yes, you said no, it didn't happen during the budget window, but that you had other conversations. So I'm asking if those conversations were inclusive of how our funds are allocated.
No, that did not happen.
Thank you very much. All right, that is all the questions that I had, and now gonna check, double checking. Thank you so much, Garrett. Appreciate your responses. Checking. I don't see any other clarifying questions for our robust and dynamic and fabulous team. Now we're going to move to our guiding question that is in the chat box, or that will be put back in the chat box, or which
I'll go
asks
ahead
us
and add that in.
about, thank you. I was trying to remember from the slide and I don't have all the, all set up. So my apologies, but, voila, that's the end of our question clarifying time. And so wanted to just preface as we move to this conversation around council recommendations of substantive changes in advance of the first reading consideration. One, that that we are requesting macro level changes and not micro item by item level changes at this time. If you have item by item level changes, our financial strategies team will tell you the process that we're going to be using, but the Cliff Notes version of that is that we plan to have the team compile some of the questions and recommendations that the city council members have, and then share those via a hotline or some mechanism that allows us to continue the high level of fiscal transparency that we're trying to maintain. So again, know that those opportunities, the additional opportunities will present themselves. We are also encouraging you, and I already have my appointment for next week with Charlotte to meet individually and go through those items line by line. Again, one thing that we did notice in the pre-conversation is that into Tina's earlier question about dedicated versus unrestricted funds, and we recognize that that is a critical piece of information that you will need to know in order to make some of those more micro level adjustments. So I urge us to really be as high level as we possibly can, understanding that we don't necessarily have all the information we need to make those micro level changes. So having said that, any other kind of framing from Charlotte or Kara as we move on to this council discussion?
So one thing that I'll share is for Financial Strategy Committee had some notes and recommendations that I think they were hoping to make as part of the process.
Awesome, thank you. Would anybody like to kick us off on any recommendations of substantive changes?
May I ask a question, Taisha?
Of course.
I am not clear about the distinction between macro and micro level changes. And a little guidance on that would be helpful.
Well, so for example, I look to the bullet points, for example, that are in the memo, and to some of these higher level, we would like to increase. I'm not seeing enough around wildfire resilience, or, if there's particular areas like the alpine balsam, that's a wonderful discussion point to bring up and maybe bring out some of the nuance of some of the concerns if there are any. So those are the kinds of things versus on, this specific line that speaks to, that's really more so in the weeds kind of thing. And it's more so, as I said, Mark, from the perspective of there may be restricted funds that won't allow us to make some of those moves. And until we have some of that additional information, it may be some of those may be challenging. But at this point, again, lift it up. And again, maybe Charlotte and Kara can give us some more guidance on whether or not that's something we can address now, or if it's something that we would encourage for the one-on-ones.
Okay.
Do you want to kick us off though? Because you're here.
Only have one, and that's and you actually hit upon it. It was capital expenditures for and by the way, let me preface this by saying I having lived in a city many decades ago that did not provide for the maintenance of its assets, this robust capital expenditure budget is music to my ears. I'm very, very supportive of it. The only place that I would consider making change is with respect to wildfire resilience, because there are two reasons for that. One is because things like underground, more robust undergrounding, or creating fire breaks actually provides more wildfire resilience. And two, if people have been reading the newspaper articles this week, many insurers are becoming more skeptical about insuring, particularly within the 80302 area code. And so I think we're going to have to be able to continue to demonstrate that we are acting aggressively to address this problem in order to maintain the interest of our insurers who are looking to basically to run away at this point. But even on its own merits, I think more capital expenditure for those kinds of projects would be a worthy expenditure, assuming we can find the the room to do it. And one comment I've made previously is if that had to await a subsequent adjustment to base to provide those funds, I think that would be all right.
Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate that. Any staff feedback on that, or I don't know exactly what we do with the piece on that, but holding space for that. I also realized that I skipped the part where our incredible finance strategy committee can speak and support us on what the process for council feedback will be, and just really clarifying that. So I had that at the end, but I'm going to put it up at the beginning. So Nicole, do you mind sharing with us what the preferred process or recommended process for feedback and updates to get us between here and the final vote?
Yes, thank you. And then thanks for giving us a moment to do this. And Mark or Ryan, if I forget anything, please feel free to supplement my memory. So we talked about this a little bit, kind of like last year's process for those of you that were here last year. And for those of you who are new, what we're hoping for is really that if people are coming to us and asking for changes to the budget, if you're asking for an addition, also come with the line item that you are asking for a subtraction, because our finance team and FSC has worked really hard to make sure that we have a balanced budget. And we don't really feel like it's fair, after all the work that staff has done, for us to tell staff to just figure it out if we want a change somewhere. So what we are asking for, as Charlotte mentioned, by September 23rd, please send those changes. And again, if you have an addition, please also have a subtraction that you're asking for. Send those to our finance staff. And Charlotte, just quick question, should we send it to you? Should we send it to Cara? Who's the collector of this information?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole, for the question. So I think we're looking for council members to post on Hotline for the transparency there, and then we'll take those back and compile them. And then with any questions too, happy to meet between now and the 23rd for any questions on that.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the clarification. And we also encourage everybody to talk to staff, again, not to ask staff to find money under a rug somewhere, but rather to make sure that you're pulling the right numbers and in getting these things together. So Mark or Ryan, do you want to add anything onto this?
Yes, I'd like to simply say absolutely. Thank you. I think that's the exact correct approach. The days of wine and roses may well be over, at least temporarily. And we just can't grab at shiny things and say, staff, we'd like to spend more money. Can you find us more money? A lot of thought has gone into the budget. And when it is said that there is not more money, I think we can accept that as at face value. Thank you.
Nothing to add from my end. Thank you, Nicole.
All right, thank you. Just want to again remind folks that some things are restricted. Actually, 68% of our budget is restricted. Am I right there? Can I get a cosign on that?
You are
metric?
correct.
Correct.
That's the magic number. So just know that anything you're deducting, there is a 68% chance that it is restricted. So I would strongly recommend meeting with staff before you do your hotline. Go ahead, Nuri. I see your hand raised.
You just asked earlier if there was just a quick response, and I don't want to take up time because we don't, but I just wanted to acknowledge Councilmember Wallett's questions about wildfire resources and just say there's a whole litany of things that staff is doing. Just know that we heard the question. We will be responding to that and listing out all the other ways that we are resourcing and providing community with support in that area, and certainly welcome further conversations with the finance team on your concerns. So just know that we will be following up.
All right. Anything else, Mark? All right, coming back to Tara.
I just wanted to give anybody on staff the opportunity to speak to my earlier question / also comment. The question comment that I had earlier.
I'll ask Michelle to talk a little bit about Alpine Balsam.
Yes. Good evening, Council. Michelle Crane with Facilities and Fleet. And it's a great question. It is a large dollar amount. We're well aware of that. And there's a long history to Alpine Balsam. So I'm going to try to get some highlights, but I'm happy to provide as much detail as helpful. A lot of the genesis of our work to consolidate services on Alpine Balsam started almost a decade ago as we were, as city staff, starting to really expand out of our current buildings, and we had started leasing quite a few buildings in order to just accommodate our staffing needs. At the same time, we have been experiencing increasing building failures in the buildings that we're currently in today. We're scattered throughout the city, and that's been part of the history of as staff and services have increased. We find different buildings in different places. Those services to the community become scattered and our staff become scattered. And now we're in a position where we're maintaining several, different buildings of varying ages and infrastructure types across the city. And we have been struggling to maintain those. Right now, we are in a position where we are chasing emergency failures in buildings all the time. We have this year now an emergency maintenance capital budget. There's a line item for that, and we continue to dip into that continually to dig up slabs to chase leaks that only then appear further on down the road in these buildings. And so that's been a lot of the consideration going into Alpine Balsam. And another huge consideration has been our goals around our climate action plan and to electrify our buildings. We're spending our money right now, our capital maintenance and our maintenance budgets, chasing emergencies and not doing anything towards our climate goals in buildings and trying to electrify our building stock, trying to improve our building envelopes, or even address good air when we have wildfires. We've had challenges with just the way our air handling systems are handling the kind of fresh air that we have in buildings for staff and the community. That's been a lot of the factors that have gone into the consolidation initiative and was actually one of the impetuses behind the purchase of the Alpine Balsam site to begin with. So that consolidation and that large number really reflects that move to not only address those buildings that are failing, if we were to make the improvements that are necessary in those buildings that we have today to both meet our climate goals, but to just also address all the infrastructure needs like roofs and mechanical systems, we'd have the same kind of price tag. And we still would be challenged in serving our community and bringing our staff together who are now in disparate locations and our community struggling to find the right front door to the services they need. And many times those people who are still receiving in-person services, it's hybrid also, and COVID changed a lot of the way we work, but those folks who are trying to seek those services are our community members who struggle to do those services on.
Michelle, you're getting hard to hear.
Oh, sorry. So I guess there's a lot of those points in there that have contributed and gone into where this consolidation and this move to build a new building at Alpine Balsam and bring staff together. Last point I will make is there is a portion that definitely the funding, a large portion that is funding the actual Western City campus and this consolidation of staff and services. But another portion of that funding you're seeing is actually doing infrastructure across the site. It supports the housing component as well, which is more than 2/3 of the actual proper site, which includes flood mitigation for safety, improvements to the area and connectivity through the site. So I hope that helped bring some of the factors together.
Now, we did get an entire presentation on this. So next time I ask, you can just tell me to read my notes for the last presentation. But thank you for saying it again, because I think it's a shocker of a sticker price. And I just think people need to keep rehearing it. I know I do.
I was just going to add, Councilmember Weiner, that the only thing I'd say, because I think Michelle talks about it well, is that the price tag will only increase as we delay and punt this down the road. The buildings are falling around us. I cannot say this enough. There are critical failures that are happening in our city buildings that we cannot fix. And just moving this down the road is just going to make that even more expensive. And the time is now. So I just can't. I cannot push this enough that we have to invest in our city buildings, in the infrastructure, and our city staff. And it has some benefits to community and our energy goals at the same time.
Thank you so much. And again, I will attest to the horsehair that is used as insulation in our main building. So thank you so much. And Matt Benjamin.
I'll just say giddy up to that, Taisha. Anyway, sorry about that. 8:30, right? Yeah, toss them out. So two points I want to sort of bring out. One is when we were discussing minimum wage, there was also some idea, we tossed around the idea of perhaps some maybe economic relief for some of maybe our smaller businesses that are going to be hardest hit. And I've been trying to work with staff on trying to figure out where some of the guardrails are of what that relief could look like. But I'm also recognizing that I'm reaching a point in this exploration that is probably beyond one person engaging with staff. And so I kind of want to ask, like, is there interest among my council colleagues to pursue a suite of options or packages for us to obviously look at? But I just want to know if there's interest in that, just because I'm realizing that I'm just crossing a little bit of that threshold of how much I'm asking staff to do on an individual basis to learn. And if there's desire by council, that then we can sort of take those next steps to explore some relief packages, and then of course decide any combination, yes or no, going forward. So it's really just a question to council: is that something that there's interest in, and then we can sort of continue to move that ball forward if there is. So I put that out there, and if there's any clarification, happy to. There's already things identified. It just needs more analysis and needs perhaps more staff time to do that.
So I just want to have a point of clarification, Matt. Is this in addition to the $200,000 that has been identified for the small business support for economic resilience?
That is completely separate, and that has nothing to do with the impact that raising the minimum wage would have on particular business sectors. And so that is a separate area of targeted, perhaps one-time relief. Because again, if we're doing the minimum wage hike kind of towards November, end of October, businesses are going to have 45 days to adjust. So that sticker shock, a little bit of relief could go a long way to soften that landing in the initial implementation of minimum wage hike. So that's where that ask is sort of stemming from. But thanks for clarifying that.
Tara, I see your hand.
I'll help. Is that the question? Who will help, or is there no question?
Is there interest? Well, again, I think you're asking if we can direct staff. And at this point, I go back to what Nicole shared around if you want to make substantive changes, then you're going to need to find out how much are we talking about and where we're going to pull it from.
Well, again, we have that, but again, asking staff to do the analysis of where those monies are, what those impact, what pots they touch, is starting to ask staff to do a lot. I'm uncomfortable directing staff to do that level of work without hearing from my council colleagues whether that's something they're interested in exploring. and then happy to sort of continue that process. But we're getting into the weeds by myself. And so I think it's appropriate to daylight that work. And I know that there's PTSD around the word straw poll. But nonetheless, I would just sort of inquire if we involve more work, that council kind of says, all right, yeah, sure, let's embark on that. And then staff can, and anybody who wants to dive in with them, of course, not just me, can embark on that process.
I just feel like this will be a rather slippery slope, right? I can see a lot of straw polls in our future around other things that folks would want to do. So again, I believe the directive is if you want to make substantive changes, that the finance team has asked us to figure out where we're going to get that money from. But it sounds like you're asking about how much money would we need for such a fund, and that is the ask for the staff.
No,
I'm just trying to find out the level of analysis that you're asking of staff in order to make this work, and how this would be different than questions that I would have around some of the other significant changes that I plan to meet with Charlotte about.
Fair. We've been given pretty good guidance from both our city attorney and city manager about sort of the general guardrails of any individual council member giving staff or asking staff to do work. I'm daylighting to you all that the amount that I have already sort of asked staff in exploration is reaching that threshold, and it would be appropriate to then ask. So if we're not concerned about those thresholds, I'm happy to continue that on my own, but it is appropriate for me to bring that to you all because it's an important question. Again, I had heard council express interest in this, and so now's the time for us to more or less put up or shut up on whether or not we're actually interested in any kind of relief, because this is the place to kind of have that dialogue in the budgetary conversation. So I'm feeling a little stuck. I either can keep doing it on the solo, or we can kind of have that
I just feel
communal
like
dialogue.
that's
So
what
I'd love
they
maybe
asked
Nuria or
us to
Teresa to
do.
weigh in to give
The other
me some
thing is,
freedom.
I would love to get some more clarity on that item where that 200,000, because it was my understanding that it is for women-owned, minority-owned businesses and technical assistance. And I know that women and minority businesses will be disproportionately impacted. So the only groups that aren't included in this would be childcare providers and those who are making the tipped wages.
If I may, and
Nuria?
I know Mark, if I may, and Mark, you certainly can answer Councilmember Adams's question. I think I just want to get clarity, and I think what we have said to staff has said to Councilmember Benjamin is that the types of questions and the inquiries he has posed is approaching the amount of staff time and research that requires a nod of 3. Because it is so voluminous in terms of staff time to answer his questions, the amount of research required. And I think that is what you're getting at, Councilmember Benjamin. Is there interest enough to ask staff to do the amount of research required to answer the question to come before budget? But I think Councilmember Evans, you posed a question that perhaps Mark can answer, because those two, the $200,000 is separate from anything that had to do with minimum wage. It was a different kind of support. Mark?
Which Mark are we talking about?
Wolf.
I think he's talking about Wolf.
You were Councilmember Wallach in this particular setting.
Happy to quickly answer. Nuria is correct. That amount is separate. Mark Wolf, Assistant City Manager. That is a little, the $200,000 for economic vitality is a little bit prospective, recognizing that we do not have an updated economic vitality strategy, which we'll dive into in 2 weeks. So certainly, happy to expand on that, but knowing that we don't have the exact programs identified, the strategy will help guide us to that. But that was contemplated well before that we were considering the impact of minimum wage.
Okay, thank you very much.
We're kind of at an impasse a little bit. So
it sounds like we need the 3. So do we have 2 additional people that would be interested in doing an investigation on a relief process for those businesses, and only those businesses that will be disproportionately impacted by the potential 8%, which is what is currently being discussed by council?
Hey, Jim,
there.
May I ask a question?
That's on the table.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely, Mark. Wallach.
What's the size of the ask?
Sorry, I didn't. You were breaking up there. I didn't hear that question.
What is the size of the ask?
It's not limited to one. I think it's going to be a range based on what's available. I mean, a good example is staff has targeted a 15% wage increase. Well, if we pick something below that, there's an overage. Well, some of that is maybe lined up in dedicated fund. Does it have to? Can it be a swap with the general? Does that free up $240,000 that we could use? I mean, these are questions that we have to sort of dabble in. I mean, a good example is liquor service is another interesting one, like the liquor fee that generates $580,000. Do we want to give a rebate of some percentage to business? So it could be any combination. I think that's why this is sort of, to Nuria's point, voluminous, because it's just trying to figure out what are the pots, and is there like, hey, we're going to give $1,000 to folks, or maybe there's one that can allow us to give 20, and we can pick anything in between. I think it's that's the volume, that's the analysis part that I've reached the end of a personal envelope as a council member to engage staff in.
Is that your Mark Wallet? You're breaking up a little.
Okay, I'll try. Is this any better?
Yeah.
This is beginning to sound like a work plan item. And I have a little difficulty in adding work plan items on the fly. Everybody has their own view of it.
And it could be a simple little thing we give a rebate on that's outside of a work plan. I just don't know until we are allowed to explore. That's what I don't have an answer for. So if it's dead on arrival, that's fine too. We can say that to our businesses.
Well, Matt, in that analysis, are you also considering support for the families and individuals that are not going to be able to, who are, on the minimum wage, that are not going to be able to make ends meet either, so that we're not only just focusing on those businesses that'll be disproportionately impacted, but recognizing that even if we were to get to 15, that's not going to be enough either. So with that proposal, I would be interested if that proposal was inclusive of reevaluating opportunities to expand our Elevate Boulder program.
It could be a part of that. Again, it's a matter of what council. I'm just trying to sample what council's will is. The broader we make it, the more money we have to find, of course, in order to meet those needs. So I was starting with a more targeted sense, just because I figured that's a little bit easier to take a nibble of. But again, it's council's will here. I've just reached the end of what I can do personally. And if there's no support, then I'll stop. That's why I'm asking.
Well, let's get to any more clarifying questions about what it is, and then we'll do the straw poll. I also just want to lift up that, I was already thinking about the Elevate program, and I was just going to plan on going through and making the proposal based on the process that was submitted by the FSC. So, Lauren, comments on the question?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's 8:30 and we didn't really have a preempt to this question beforehand. It feels like some detail, maybe through a hotline post, would help me feel more comfortable in terms of understanding what I would be potentially supporting or not. I just don't feel like for me, it feels like there could be a lot of different options to explore, and there are probably a number that I am uninterested in. And if there was a hotline post sort of suggesting what direction we're looking at, more specifics, I might be willing to support something there. But I think for just a general search, I'm at this point in the evening.
Do you mind if I chime in with a process suggestion, Taisha? Because I think a nod of 3, I think technically we're supposed to have those at business meetings. And so maybe, Matt, you might have a CAC request, maybe possibly with a hotline as well, outlining what you're talking about, and we could consider it under matters for a nod of 3 at a business meeting.
Whatever process works.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, Matt.
I did have one. There was one other thing that got sucked into a black hole on that one. Unless there's more clarifying questions on the relief stuff.
Yes. So I do just can I add one thing to this conversation before it wraps up? So it sounds like what we're doing is kind of opening a door to not necessarily kind of exploring things on our own, but rather trying to get a nod of 3 in order to go explore things that we may be interested in. And this does not feel like that feels a little treacherous to me. So I would just like to point that out. I think that the door opens wide open then if we're looking at proposing budget changes based on a nod of 3 and asking staff to go and look for it. And so to me, this kind of fits back into what we had requested initially with regard to changes. And I wonder if there's a way that at that once we've kind of seen everything via hotline, is there a way for us to prioritize some of that as a group? Because otherwise I feel like we could get 10 different requests for nods of 3 to go and explore things in a short period of time. Just feels a little slippery to me.
Appreciate that. I was just running on the general interest I heard at a previous conversation about interest in this kind of relief. So I was just building on that. So, but point well taken. I'll do a hotline and go down that path, and we shall see where that ends up. So appreciate
Matt,
that.
I'm definitely down to help. Would love to meet with you and work through and try and find where we can, again, unrestricted for both of our interests on that one.
Sounds great. Appreciate that. The last thing I had was just generally about it was a question just kind of where does the user interface of this budget go? The quality of the budget is great, but my question is where can we work to better collaborate with staff to make the experience of exploring the budget easier, more user friendly, and feeling like you have success without burning hours upon time. So I'm just open to figuring out, does that mean to be council led at some point? Because there's been a number of items that have been asked over the years and that haven't been implemented. Or is that engaging community to kind of say, hey, how would you like to see this information displayed in a way that's more digestible? So that's a question I have, just about what does that process look like on how we would go forward? Because we seem to have this conversation at the 11th hour when we're in the midst of the budget and we don't talk about it for 9 months before we get back to the state again. So just usability, navigability, user interface to me would be a major thing for us to figure out what we want to do with.
Thank you so much, Matt. I could not agree more. And I actually, Nicole, I'm wondering if we could put this in the council process list as well, as something that is certainly something we'd love to take a bite at before next March. How's y'all? Are there no more hands? Are there no more big macro things that folks would like to raise up before they send a hotline? Nicole.
Yes. First of all, my anxiety is growing after 2 minutes ago when I said that conversation, when I just expressed my concern about heading into this a situation where we're asking staff to explore different options. So I just want to raise that. I don't know if others are kind of feeling some anxiety on that. I just am feeling like this is going to lead us down a path where we are asking staff for all kinds of explorations that I think wasn't necessarily what FSC had in mind. But anyway, on the sort of budget thing, I will say this will sound like a broken record to those of you who've been listening to me for a few years. But I just continue to believe that the money that we're spending on the SAMPS program, which is now proposing to go up to 3.7 million for next year, is really not the best use of funds to think about how we clean up our public spaces. Every year we're spending more and more money on this program. Now being up to 3.7 million, that's about 3 times where we are when we started 3 years ago. And I'll just kind of continue to make this point that we're spending more money every year on a program where the problem we are trying to solve just keeps getting worse. We are seeing more tons of trash. We're seeing more encampments cleaned up. And I will just kind of continue to bring up that this does not feel like a great investment, though I appreciate the, the compassion of the folks who are involved in this work. Putting folks into a hard situation, but I can think of a lot of ways to spend 3.7 million right now. And the continuing to clean up people's trash doesn't feel like a great one to me.
Thank you, Nicole.
That is all.
I see Mark Wallach.
Yeah, I'm not going to debate the SAMPS issue this evening. I have a different view of it, but that's neither here nor there. I do want to agree with my colleague on her discomfort and apprehension that we not open the door towards a full-scale renegotiation of this budget. We need to have it in place somewhere before February, and we will easily be doing it until February if we're not careful. So the premise was make a proposal, identify the offset, and then we can discuss it from there. And I hope we will adhere to that operating procedure. I think that will work well for us and gets a budget passed in due course. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I see Tara.
Well, you know how I feel about the SAMS budget, but do we plan on debating this? Because if so, I need to get ready for the many things I have to say about that. So it might not have to be tonight, or is that just like a statement that you want to bring up? Because if that's the case, I just want to bring up how important that SAMS budget is, since for $3.7 million, we certainly can't build a Larimer County like health facility or many other things. So a lot of stuff, our hands are tied behind our back. It's supposed to be the county that's doing it. Nobody thinks this is the number one way to handle all the issues people have. It's not really as expensive as so many other things. That's all I'm going to say. But I realize tonight's not the night to say that. So I'm going to not say anymore.
And just to be clear, I don't intend to debate it. That's not my intention. I keep stating this every year, and I will continue to do that. We've had this debate many times, not trying to go back to it. Thank you.
Again, every new year, new council, and so we will have opportunities to continue to debate this coming up. I see Ryan. Bring it in.
Thanks. I just wanted to, as the third member of the financial strategies team, agree with my colleagues that I'm also anxious about this idea of opening up to a list of lists of questions about where to find money and look for it. It feels like that could take us down a road that will be hard to end, and certainly hard to end in a timely way. And I have a lot of confidence in the default setting that our team is giving us. And so anyway, I'll just agree with my two colleagues, Nicole and Mark. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any other hand before I bring in my comments? I just have a couple. One, very interested in finding ways to increase and amplify the Elevate Boulder program in light of us not even coming close to meeting a minimum, a living wage, not to mention minimum wage. I don't play the minimum wage game because that was a game that's meant to fail. But our responsibilities around Elevate Boulder. I know we have a report coming up soon, but I will be working very hard on doing my math to make proposals on how to get there. And also want to just circle back to comments that Mark made in the hotline around behavioral health, which continues to be chronically underfunded. And so I'm eager to work with anybody on council who would be interested in finding ways to amplify and not only our own city's commitment, but also trying to help navigate and amplify the work with our county around that effort. I would also want to say I'm excited about the efforts around economic vitality and BIPOC owned and operated businesses and women owned businesses. And, I know that Patrick is new but it's almost been, it's been a good amount of time, and I'm hopeful in the conversations that he's had with businesses that there are some directives based on the conversation that Tina and I were able to go to in the council chats. Am eager to make sure that we're not just bringing people together to talk with them, but we're actually making investments. And again, these investments are not charity. These investments are debt owed. The other piece that I would love to lift up here is people with disabilities, and just our process. Again, disappointed to hear that we are not engaging. And this is where I get upset about this equity and the way that the word equity is almost weaponized, because I hear it used all the time, but I don't see it in implementation. Equity means meaningful participation. And one of the most meaningful ways you can participate in our government is in how our resources are allocated. And so it is my expectation that critical partners are engaged during the budget phase. And it's very disappointing to hear that specifically the Center for People with Disabilities was not engaged, considering how much engagement has been happening over the years around some of the other, parks and recreation, OSMP, et cetera. But I am just hopeful that we can make some process-oriented changes as we look to 2025 and moving forward, so that we have more participatory budgeting opportunities for our critical partners, and especially those who have been dispossessed, discriminated against, and continue to face discrimination because of the intersection of identities and mobility, et cetera. So I'm eager to also find ways. Their funding has also been flat. This is why I keep asking about Health and Human Services, and finding out what programs and what communities are being served, and what communities are not. So I'm eager to learn much, much more. I will, in a broken record to Nicole, but my broken record is, where does our money go to support humans? How effective is that money? And what can be reallocated to really amplify what we know is working? I come from the nonprofit space where there's the refrain of, we're trying to work ourselves out of a job. Well, that's what we're going to be doing. So anywho, that's all I have at this moment. I want to again thank our incredible team, and want to make sure that I'm not missing anything before I close us out at 9:05. So I just want to turn it over to Charlotte, Kara, or Nuria to just make sure that I'm faithful to the process. Should I kick it back over? Oh, Tina, I see your hand. Or not. Wait.
If Tina doesn't have a question, I just wanted to make sure staff didn't have any lingering clarifying questions or not. But I think we've heard your questions, your inquiries, have a good sense, and hopefully you will make an appointment with our wonderful team so that we can hear more of what's on your mind.
And point of clarification, the expectation is that we would have the hotline out by the 23rd, or that, can I just get some more clarity on what the expectation is for us to submit?
Charlotte, we don't get often time to give direction to council. Let's take advantage of
that. So we have to get the council packet to you all by September 25th. We're hoping to get all council recommendations out through hotline by the 23rd, that we will then compile and incorporate into the memo that we'll share out to you all on the 25th.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I jump in for just a second? I was trying to colloquy, but I was on mute. Sorry. I just want to, I appreciate your comments about involving different groups in every step. I don't think the prior council had set out the expectation of engagement during the programming, resourcing, prioritization, and the budgeting. And I think that that's something we should talk about, is adding as an expectation, understanding that that wasn't clearly set out at the beginning of this budget process, I don't think. And I'm hoping that we can talk more about what that looks like over time with the different groups.
I I always appreciate your comments, Tina. I will say I did ask this explicit question during my pre-session at the at my pre-session. I said, hey, what's the process? And they said, oh yeah, our critical partners are engaged from March to June. And then I found out that wasn't the case for some of our critical partners. So I wanted to clarify, but I agree that having a shared expectation and real clarity around who those partners and stakeholders are moving forward will be absolutely critical. So thank you for bringing that up. Put myself on mute. Seeing no other hands, again, I want to thank the team for putting this together. All of those who were engaged in the process, those who filled out the questionnaire, those who went to the sessions, our community connectors. Thank you so much for your participation in this process, and know that we are certainly committed to continuing to make sure that we are transparent and as participatory as possible moving forward. Thank you so much to my fellow council members for the rigorous conversation. I look forward for more. I strongly encourage us to continue our own little one-on-ones as we're moving forward, because we are better and stronger together, but of course not breaking any laws by having more than two. All right, having said that, I will go ahead and close us out at 9:04. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Night, everybody.